2, 3, 4. In this podcast, you will hear Knights of Vader. Knights of Vader includes, but is not limited to, talk of Star Wars, not ray guns. We can't truly prepare for the joke that follows this song, but hey, we gave it a try. So here's the Knights of Vader. Crystal Fox report, they are divided. Prequel, sequel, hate and love, they fighted. I know that we are just musicians hired, and their time is up, so here's the Knights of Vader.
Impressive. Most impressive.
A big thank you to An Insperiority Complex for providing our theme song. It is July 25th, 2021. My name is Zach Weber, and joining me today is the one only true cyclist of Virginia, Zenger.
Oh, I'm honored to be the true cyclist.
You're the only cyclist, Zenger. I know.
No, there's other ones. I saw them. They waved at me.
Lies, deception. And we have premier insert Canadian collector joke here, Chris Porteous.
Hey, I went to the first toy show since it's been allowed today, so my reputation is earned. Canada is really slow at opening up compared to you guys. So
do the rankings reset now that they have a new, like, things are opening? Like, did you have a chance to get to number one today?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I can't officially talk about it yet, but because the lockdown took like 2 years, some of the higher ranking collectors have actually died in the last 2 years. So
Didn't expect that.
Up. Yeah, I've gone up because of that. They didn't die from the coronavirus though. It's okay.
The shelves got too heavy and fell on them, of course.
Oh God. And we have our Bard of Vader, Rob.
Yes, thank you for having me back for a topic that is probably way out of my depth.
And last but not least, Joe Yazzo.
Hey, how you doing?
Oh boy. Alrighty, everybody. We are here to talk Star Wars nonsense. Hopefully Star Wars nonsense. There'll be all sorts of tangential topics related here. But before we get started, I think one thing we have to talk about, considering our affinity for the 2003 micro series.
Yeah.
Disney making repackaged figures, man. Like, God, Lucasfilm is pouring marketing dollars, kinda, into something that even Lucas didn't want remembered. So I'm kind of curious. Like I'll let Zenger go first, but then I'm kind of fascinated as to what Chris's thoughts are on this.
I mean, I'm excited for this. I can't wait. I guess I'm going to use this point to be reminding everyone that you can check out Zing Wars for us eventually covering Volume 2.
Get out of here. Get out of here with Zing Wars nonsense. No, it doesn't exist. No, Zing Wars is a lie. It's fake news.
Perfect. Awesome. Lies, deception. No, I mean, I'm excited for this. Like, maybe a resurgence is in order. Maybe this is the beginning. This is the first step in a resurgence for the superior series. Anyways.
Yeah, yes, I agree with the latter half of that statement. Chris Porteous, I know you and I love reading the tea leaves of merchandise reveals. What is your take on this? Were you surprised by this at all?
Are these Walmart exclusives only?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, God dang it. I got to go into there and be near people.
To if it makes you feel any better, the pre-order went up, but it did not go up in Canada. So I haven't even had the opportunity to pretend to be interested in these yet. You know, is it cool that they're referencing that series? Yes. But these are all, like, I think it's accurate to say, like, all of these figures are about 10 years old, and they're basically being mild paint adjustments.
So what you're saying is somebody opened a crate somewhere at Kenner and was like, oh, crap, we got a ton of these.
I love that you still think it's actually Kenner. That's great. It hasn't been Kenner since about 1999.
I'm reading what's on here, and that might have been true too then.
Yeah,
the box.
They do use the logo on the box, but that's because Hasbro bought Kenner like 20 some years ago. But yeah, so I don't know, like, it's cool they're using those images, but like the figures obviously look nothing like the animated show. They're repackaging figures that were part of different lines. I think the two clone troopers are the most interesting because if they at least changed the paint scheme on the helmet to like match the 2003 series, so it actually those two sort of look like they're from the cartoon, whereas like the Ayla Secura figure, like that's an awesome figure if you didn't have the previous vintage collection version. I'm sure it has face printing now, so it probably looks better than it ever did, but it looks really weird next to the incredibly simplistic cartoon drawing of her on the card back, like in my opinion.
But my thing is this, like, I don't understand once again why it says ARC Trooper Captain. He has a name. His name was Captain Fordo.
Yeah, they probably considered that like way too deep of a cut, like because it's like 19 years old and
is it?
When is like when was his name ever?
It's never
when was
said.
his name ever said?
It's
not.
It was never said.
Wait,
he's just
okay. On that note, I know this is from a previous discussion I was not involved in. Was Slave 1 ever spoken out loud in the series?
no.
Are we sure? Are we sure it wasn't in Clone Wars though? Because I feel like it was in like mid Clone Wars. Because it gets a lot. It gets a lot of screen time like mid Clone Wars with the.
It was Kid Boba Fett.
Yeah.
Well, I was about to say I'm going with continuity of the movies because God knows what they're going to cut out anymore. Anyways, on another topic for today, what they're going to cut out of the sequel trilogy.
Yes. I don't want to draw it out. Like it's cool they're referencing it. Apparently they're doing some Black Series ones as well, which might have some changes. And those they're gonna have packaging reminiscent of like one of the 2003 sort of Gendy packages.
Actually, I'm kind of curious though. Like, is it going to reference the Gendy packaging, or is it going to reference the like faux live action packaging?
Well, that's the question.
Nobody
right?
knows.
Because,
they haven't said which one.
There's no good answer because the vintage collection references the Gendy stuff, but the figures look fully realistic. So like the Black Series one should be the other line probably since they're not changing the figures much at all. But I'm guessing double down on Gendy for consistency if I had to guess.
I guess. Well, like I said, like when I saw that these were like announced, I was kind of like, okay, putting aside the like repacks of Ayla, Luminara, and Barriss.
It's all of them, but yeah.
Yeah. Like putting those aside, like I was shocked by the the ARC Troopers, because think about it, that was our first introduction to like ARC Troopers on like a mainstream level. And then like they announced them like StarWars.com, and then they just went up for pre-order on Walmart.com the very next day. And the first time they went live, like at 10 a.m., I missed out on them, and I was like mad. And then like the 3 3/4 went back up again around like 1. I was able to get the ARC Troopers, which is all I cared about. I wasn't able to get any of the Black Series. But like everything else that we've kind of talked about on this podcast, like if they're doing this, and this is like what now, 2.5 months after Gendy like debuted on Disney Plus, that has to mean that the numbers for that must be pretty good.
Wait. If this is doing well, then that means there's a definite correlation with. Oh my God, Star Wars D2 is confirmed.
No.
But I mean, what's your best case scenario? Like
for what?
like if they're actually realizing there's like some. Like I don't think they're up to anything. The 50th anniversary line has been referencing so many random things.
Like
But this is the thing though, is that like every time they pour money into something like this, or like the fact that like the announcement for this didn't come from like, again, like Yakface didn't find this in like a URL search. This was announced with no like lead up to it, like most toy things are. The fact that this came from StarWars.com lends to the notion of like Disney Lucasfilm is proud of this. They want people, because for a while it was like the headline on like the landing page of StarWars.com, even if it was only for like a day, which means they were trying to get some attention for this, whether it be a slow news day or not. Like I said, I think the numbers must have been there. You do not get this as something they're pouring attention. Remember, there's a reason why there's been no further Rise of Skywalker merchandise and why you're getting this instead. Like, think about that. You have the quote unquote final Star Wars film that pretty much just died merchandise wise after December 2019. And then for a show that's 18 years old is getting repackaged merchandise. And it's being hyped up as much as Lucasfilm hypes up anything in the contemporary era. And that's just, to me, telling. That means they whatever numbers they got out of Disney Plus, they are very happy with. And not just Lucas, maybe Disney at large. Like I said, I think it's a good thing. I wouldn't be. I'm just throwing it out there. Considering that most of what, like think about it, Genndy has been like a studio man for Sony now for what, almost a decade with the Hotel Transylvania films.
Also,
I wouldn't.
he has Primal too.
Sure, but that's more. That's not. But that's very much a specific like demographic. It's not like is wide is something like Hotel Transylvania. I wouldn't be just throwing it out there. Considering that Disney Plus is now like the sole medium for Star Wars content, I wouldn't be surprised if we get some announcement depending on, again, however the winds turn. It might be premature to even say something like this, even on a speculative level. I wouldn't be surprised if we get some announcement that Genndy comes back into the fold for another animated series. And I think a lot of it is contingent on how successful Visions is. I think if Visions is a successful, whatever you want to call it, like media launch, I think there's a very real possibility based on the fact that they're reissuing toys with, even like you said, like they're doing live action versions of like Luminara, Ayla, and Barriss, and they're using Genndy imagery. I think if the plans align, I could see Genndy being brought back into the fold. Because keep in mind, the reason why I remember Lucas wanted Genndy to do the 2008 series with him, and Genndy told him like no, like Genndy didn't want any, like wanted no parts of that level of like this like micromanaging.
Yeah, but this sort of like ties into a little bit what we're eventually going to talk about here, which is like
eventually
what would it mean to bring a post Hotel Transylvania Genndy into Star Wars at this point in time with the current management? What would that mean? What would that be? Would it do anything for you at this point in time?
They'd be able to put wolves and everything. I mean, at least there's that. As long as you can do that, I think they're good.
Well, you're getting these new toys released because Disney owns the property now. They actually have it on Disney Plus. Of course, they're going to make action figures of it. And the reason why they're not making them in the style of the animated series is because what person would want a different type of figure than the ones that they already have?
Well, the kids who got the figures based on the actual Genndy cartoon in 2003, which are awesome and look like the cartoon. And if I were a fan of the Genndy series,
it has no articulation.
Yeah, that's fine.
Duh.
Because you put them on a shelf and you look at them and bask in their glory. But
as you should.
But what I'm saying is like, if you're actually like a religious zealot for the Genndy Clone Wars, you should be much more interested in finishing up your collection of those figures than these new ones, in my opinion.
But how much do those Genndy figures go for?
Not much more than the retail price of these new ones. A little bit more.
But also, okay, the only thing about eBay.
Yeah, they're not super, they're not like, all that stuff is getting desirable, but they're not like ridiculously desirable like the Legacy series or like the comic packs. Like they're not like crazy overpriced because a lot of it is people don't like that they barely have articulation, but they look like the cartoon.
Fun fact, I gave all my Genndy figures to Zenger.
Yep.
Wow, that's awesome.
I have them in the old office, and I need to move them to the new office.
But I think, look at even like I said, I promise, folks, we'll get to the actual topic at hand. But just, I want to mention that, like with that blue ARC Trooper, we never even got that, like in any of the OG lines. Like, right, Chris? Like, we never got the blue ARC Trooper with like the skirt. We never got like.
That's fine, but like you got so much though. Like I think I posted in the Knights of Vader group not long ago. Like I picked up like that one clone who's wearing a poncho with mud all over him. Like that's featured for like 10 seconds. Like you got a lot from that series. Like whether it was like realistic, stylized, or the cartoon one, and like. There like in the so that scene where Yoda's like rotting like a purple tauntaun thing, I think it's called
Kaibuck.
Yeah, there you go. They made that in the Legacy series, like realistic style. Like that is like you're never gonna get anything that audacious again from Hasbro. So like go ahead and do yourself a favor and find Yoda riding the Kaibuck from like 2009 or whatever the heck it was, and get that, because it's kind of like the Yifan Mon figure. It's like so outrageous and silly that they're never gonna get back to that point ever again. So like I like that they're bringing it up again. I think there is an audience for it. I think people really like that stuff, and like some of the younger fans like that stuff. Like for example, I was at this toy show today, and I saw a kid who must have been like 8 come up and look at a sealed turbo tank, and he was like hassling his parents badly to buy it for him. But I like how a kid who's 8 even knows what that is, because I like it's his life.
Well, no, okay, Chris, what episode of The Mandalorian features a turbo tank?
Well, yeah, but that's no, but I mean, like he actually seemed like he knew what it was, and he probably wouldn't from that episode of Mandalorian.
I'm just saying, man, is it like, okay, like it comes down to that, because again, we could debate this forever, but I just want to ask you, Chris, is that like based on the fact that look at all these things, you have Visions, which is very much stylistically more similar to Gendy than anything else Lucasfilm has ever done. You have the reintroduction, you have of Dirge into canon, and now you have these toy reveals tied into the Gendy's Clone Wars being officially on a Disney platform. You don't think there's anything to this as in a larger picture?
Not at all.
So you think it's just kind of all coincidence?
I think it's like the original 50th anniversary. Like I think I can hear Rob snoring in the background, so we better move on soon. But like I
know I lost the Star Wars. I know it's okay.
It's all good. But you know, the original when the 50th anniversary Lucasfilm stuff first came out, they had like I don't know if they still do or not. They had like a timeline on the back, sort of like showing the various eras. I think this is all just par for the course. They're putting out these horrible Power of the Force 2 Black Series figures that it's just stop. Like I grew up with those as a kid, and I do not want those at all. Like you're literally trying to cash in on what is unanimously considered the absolute worst era of Star Wars figures, period, where they just looked ridiculous, and they learned quickly that they shouldn't design them that way. But they're reissuing old figures with those card backs for whatever fun reason. Not interested. I mean, like, you know, I don't think there's anything to it. The Gendy series is obviously good, and there's lots of stuff you can buy for it without spending much more than these new figures that actually Hasbro and Disney will not profit off of it if you buy it, and it's much more representative of the original content.
Like I said, again, it's just the fact that like Disney has such a tight leash on Hasbro, and the fact that they're doing this would not happen. I can't imagine Hasbro going to Disney and being like, "Let's do this."
Yes, I can, because it's the cost of investment is very little because they're all old figures.
That's fine though, but like even still, Lucasfilm doesn't sign off on anything unless it's part of the bigger picture.
It was recently added to Disney Plus.
That's the thing though. Like if they did all of this all at once, like, oh, this is part of like, I don't know, like an announcement, like in April when they did that thing, like, oh, look what's coming to Disney Plus next month, and those figures announcements came at that exact same time, I would be like, oh, this makes sense.
You're assuming that someone in charge actually understands the scope of the content.
So when are we getting our whatever figures, Detours figures,
and Ewok Adventures?
No, I'm saying when are we getting those figures? I want that era, the forgotten era. Star Wars that didn't even exist.
Exactly.
That's what I'm saying. Like if Detours is too fun. That's the message we're getting. Detours is too fun for current Lucasfilm. So
well, it's the same thing that happened back with like Ralph Rex the Internet. It was like they didn't want Kylo Ren in that movie because they didn't want them ruining the IP.
Is that
like
but here you know what? I don't think it's the same thing. Because I don't think they were in danger of being criticized for anything that occurs in Ralph Rex the Internet.
No, but I think it's just like they're very weird with Star Wars, Lucasfilm. They don't know how, again, they're we've said this before in the past. They don't want to make fun of it. They're so afraid of somebody not taking Star Wars seriously that they'll go out of their way to kind of suck the fun out of it.
I feel like, yeah, but for sure. But like Lucas was definitely okay with jokes and detours that like,
but this is also
a
like
lot of
lesser
people would have trouble with today.
That's the thing. Like that's like lesser year Lucas. That was like Lucas the tail end when he's like, I don't care. Just like I just want to like
The
wear
best
shorts,
Lucas,
some
yes.
like
I just want to be able to order my Chinese food in peace.
and wear
Seth
shorts.
Green, please leave me alone, Seth Green. I'm trying to order my food, Seth Green. Sir, that
So much
isn't even
Seth
Seth Green. That's Seth Rogen. Whatever.
Which is really funny because there's the article about how Seth like Rogen's like fascinated by the fact that Lucas thought the world was going to end in 2012, which is another fantastic read. If anyone just Google Lucas Rogen 2012 and you will not be bored for 5 minutes. Okay,
I could derail this whole episode to defend Lucas's position on that, but
That's
Do
fine.
you
never
want
mind.
to?
No, not right.
Is this
Well,
something
no,
you want to do actively?
we'll get to that.
Okay.
Maybe that'll be festive. That'll be festive as 2021. All right, but on to the topic at hand. The reason why everybody was brought together for tonight's recording. 25 minutes into this recording.
Oh no, I got Lego news we got to talk about first. They have officially announced the advent calendar for 2021, and it's just Mando themed.
And
You
here
can
I thought
get-
you were going to talk about the Republic gunship.
No, I'm not interested in that. They got Grogu in a little Christmas sweater, so that's adorable. They got Mando with a little like scarf on.
Are we really
so
gonna talk about this?
that's worth it. And they got the little turret gun thing that you guys were talking about earlier, but in tiny form. So that's
All
the
right,
advent
moving on.
calendar. I'm excited.
All right. We'll get to that too. I feel like Chris, you don't have to talk about the fact that like they didn't include like a clone pilot or like they excluded Mace
Or that's
Windu.
not to scale, and Ellie is still like, that's your problem.
Yeah,
That's your
that's
problem with
outrageous.
this?
Like I saw people come like, okay, we're not going to get back to it. Let's be honest. Anyone who's complaining that their new UCS Republic gunship is out of scale needs to like stop collecting Lego, because Lego is a ridiculous form factor where there's like cartoon block men. So accept that they're out of scale, because there's a Harry Potter castle wherein the figures are like one stud. So like scale does
so
not
you're talking about
mean-
the one that is currently sitting in my goddamn living room right now, unbuilt. But
There you
yet
go.
I could have a goddamn Star Destroyer that isn't to scale, and I could
Listen.
have that taking up an entire room in my house.
It's a complete coincidence that the Millennium Falcon worked out, the UCS Millennium Falcon worked out to be sort of in scale with the minifigures and be like the right size for a preposterous retail release. There's no reasonable expectation that any of the others will be that way. Like, stop talking about scale. It's Lego. It's supposed to look awesome and be fun to build. It's no matter what, it doesn't look like the source material because it's Lego.
No, no, it's ridiculous, because if I put a figure in there, it's like, what are these tiny little figures doing in this gigantic ship?
If you stand 3 feet back from it, it looks like a Republic gunship.
But if I put the figures in, they look like tiny little things inside a ship that...
Okay, but check this out though. Like, let's derail this. Let's fully just blow this up. So the Hasbro Republic gunship is like almost half too small, but you wouldn't think about that. But like it is. Like, you look at the movie and like it's like 2 stories. like so none of them are right. The real issue here is that what is the right size for a retail product? That's all it comes down to.
Okay, if I get this, I will have both of them hanging onto the rails at the top of the thing just to make it look even more ridiculous. Just to be clear, like, they will be hanging onto those rails and be just hanging there.
Okay,
10 inches off of the ground.
But are there not UCS? Are there not UCS Star Wars ships that do not even have minifigures? Like, isn't there a TIE fighter that's obviously way too big for a minifigure?
Sure, I don't know. That's back in time before Lego.
Argument destroyed.
No, I mean, do you just why don't you point out the most obvious one like Ellie did and just go after my Star Destroyer? Yeah, it comes with figures that are definitely not to scale, but I mean, they don't go anywhere in the ship. It's not like I can put one of them in a captain's chair.
This is how dumb this argument is. The Harry Potter castle
Oh
you're
my
talking
god.
about, the Harry Potter castle comes with little figures that go on it and then regular figures that don't go on it because they're too big for it.
Yeah, because they're exclusive to that. Okay, you are describing the Hogwarts castle, $400, and it comes with the founders of Hogwarts minifigs.
I
And it
don't know
also
who
comes
those
with
characters
tiny
are.
figs.
I don't know who those characters are, but I saw that it came with little baby figures and regular sized ones, and my conclusion is that scale does not matter with Lego.
It's 6,020 pieces. 6,020 pieces. It is currently sitting in my goddamn living room doing nothing right now.
It looks awesome, but
In a box.
but scale doesn't matter.
No, but now
Scale
you have
matters
tiny
not.
scale. Now you have tiny scale. I want large scale for my. So if I get that gunship, which I probably won't, Ellie probably will, and I will call it blasphemy and get my Star Destroyer and have it like wreck into it, because why not?
My girlfriend just sent me a text to say stop bashing the Lego Harry Potter castle.
I mean, I'll get Ellie if you just want a rage moment. I was
I
like,
wasn't
someone's
bashing-
bashing the Harry Potter castle,
wasn't-
and she'll be like, what?
I wasn't bashing it, but it's just like literally like, okay, I'm going to let you guys move on in 1 second, but like think about Lego for 1 second. They're square men with yellow skin like the Simpsons, and like they don't look like humans, and they are on little blocks that are all square like Minecraft, and we're talking about scale.
I don't see the issue here. What's the problem?
This is delightful.
I rest my case.
You guys, oh god, I can literally hear the listener count just drop. All right, there's something I want to say about like the ultimate like collector set like Star Destroyer, but I'm not going to.
Oh no, go ahead. We're here. Let's do this.
I have to. All right, so I was at like a discount like store, like one of those ones that has like.
Oh
they
my
had, like, a bunch
god,
of, like,
no! I know where this is
listen.
going.
Listen. No, I didn't do anything, but I saw it and I kind of got excited. Like it's like one of those like wholesale stores. They had a bunch of like Fozzie Bear plushes like for 75 cents each, and I started laughing. But like what they had like behind the counter, like as a display piece, they had the like USC like Star Destroyer for like $500, and for a split second I was tempted. I'm like, that's a pretty good deal. And then I realized they probably just like took all the minifigs out and probably just trying to resell it. But I'm like, that's a pretty solid price for a USC set, like $500. UCS set, my bad.
I want it. God, I want it. But it was already put together.
No, it was in the box.
Oh, okay. I was like, it was
Everyone-
already put
like-
together.
The slave one is the only cool like UCS. Like, let's get real.
Boba Fett ship. Excuse you.
Boba Fett Starship.
Boba Fett starship.
Yeah,
as opposed
that's
to
a-
Boba Fett planet ship.
Because Boba Fett's ship is like the boat he like pilots around or like goes around like on weekends.
I'm so glad that came up. I'm so glad that just came up.
Anyways,
like,
I'm excited about the Vader meditation chamber. Moving on. There, I did the Lego moment.
Vader. Yeah. So like on the subject of Boba Fett's starship, because that was the title.
Tried to
that was the
move
title
on.
of the last episode. I was looking at some 2008 era Hasbro stuff at this toy show today, and I realized that amongst like a bunch of vehicles being advertised, like the Bark Speeder on the back of these Clone Wars packaging, and like the Boga and the ATRT, there's this vehicle that's called it's a lot like Boba Fett's starship. It's called General Grievous's Wheel Bike. It's a very literal name. I thought that I saw that, and the fact that it doesn't have like a canonical absurd name made me think of Boba Fett's starship. So like it's not unreasonable that once in a while they just literally attribute a vehicle to a character and move on with it.
No. All right. I literally, we can hear Rob just passed out in the background.
He's dead.
Do I get like a Star Wars Boy Scout medal for sitting through that?
Rob's like, goddamn nerd. Rob's just yelling the entire time, nerds. All right, getting on to the topic at hand, before anybody else derails it, including myself. The point of this discussion was there was a YouTube video that I was kind of tickled by from, I haven't mentioned them, nearly in a year and a half now. It's from what was one of my favorite punching bags back in the day during The Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker era, Midnight's Edge. The video is titled "The Message Behind Disney's Star Wars Trilogy Being Thrown Under the Bus by the Atlantic." And this video is referencing in the Atlantic article titled, quote, "How Disney Mismanaged the Star Wars Universe." I invite everybody listening to this episode to go listen to this YouTube discussion, if you can call it that. But more importantly, go read the Atlantic article. I'll link to it in the show notes. It's not a very long article. It's maybe a dozen paragraphs long, and they're rather short paragraphs, maybe a couple sentences each. My thing is that part of me doesn't even want to summarize the Atlantic article because I'm kind of curious what everybody's take on it is. But the summary of the Midnight's Edge video is Kathleen Kennedy is Satan. She's done nothing but ruin Star Wars. The usual trope that started after The Last Jedi's release. But the main point of this YouTube video is this article from the Atlantic is the final nail in Kathleen Kennedy's coffin. She's going to be imminently fired sometime this year, and this is kind of the death knell. This is it. This is it. She's done. She's going to at some point she's going to retire at the end of this year, and Indiana Jones 5 is going to be her swan song.
Okay, cool. Awesome. That's the greatest thing I could ever have heard in my life. Continue, Zach. Sorry.
What do you think they're going to do with Kathleen Kennedy after that? I mean, because we all know that she literally did not exist until Disney made her in a lab to head Star Wars. Do they recycle her for parts?
you put her in a box, and then it's the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
She goes in the warehouse. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is Area 51, by the way.
Yes, Bob, which it was discovered by Bob Lazar thanks to the Unbelievers podcast. So we're bringing this all full circle. We miss you, Russ. All right, so we always miss Russ, especially now that Russ told me that he'll give me a spot on Unbelievers to talk about real scary stories at some point. Look forward to that, Rob. Look forward to that. So just going around the room, because Zenger as always didn't do the required reading for the discussion. We'll save him for last because he has a chance to kind of copy off everybody else before the teacher calls on him. So I want to begin with Rob because I know Chris probably has a lot to say about this. Rob, considering that you are the official bard of Vader, you are our resident filthy casual, relative to the rest of us. I don't know if he's the filthiest. He's pretty stinky though. But Rob, what is your take on all this?
So when you sent the article and the video over, I actually read the article first and then went to the video. I don't remember. I know you sent in the Facebook chat between us earlier that you suggested the other order, but when you told me about this a few days ago, I switched the order. I got such a different idea from the article than what's presented in the video, and I think that's just because of where I'm coming from on this topic. But something that I found really interesting, and I think you guys are going to latch on to that Midnight's Edge video in that the sleight of hand of industry manipulation that Cameron Pasha talks about in that. I dug into a lot of the other articles that they linked to and cited in the Atlantic article, and some of them more explicitly than others all get at this kind of same idea that I feel like these types of articles are presenting the idea that the only way for Star Wars to return to its former glory or its kind of, acceptable version to not cause controversy, I guess that's the goal, I'm not really sure, is that they basically need to do away with the Force entirely. And the article that really explicitly states that is the first one they link to in the Atlantic. It's in the second paragraph. When they mention the Force, there's a sentence that's underlined, and it links to a Jacobin article. And if you know anything about Jacobin, it starts with the usual their political flair of saying that pop culture is intrinsically fascist and things like that.
Hooray.
Jacobin has some very weird takes on things. That I think one of my favorite articles from them is a huge diatribe of someone saying that, like, the world will end unless Shark Tank is off the air. It's so capitalistic. But there's a few interesting ideas, and that article is actually titled "Smash the Force." So my big takeaway after reading these, maybe like 4 or 5 articles was that they were really, like I said, either implicitly or explicitly getting at the idea of the only way to continue Star Wars is to somehow kill the Force. Or if the Force is ever used, it's so rare that it's only like once a season of a show or maybe once in a trilogy of movies. The other side of it, the video, which I think you guys are gonna get into, that's the stuff that I found wildly interesting, that I have some thoughts on, but probably less so, and I'm more interested to hear what you guys think about that.
Hold on a second. Aren't they making Ahsoka like the lead for like going forward with the show? So
but hold on, Zenger, this is all about just trying to like perceive what the art, what is that the commentary wants us to believe about the current state of Star Wars.
Whoa, wait a second. If they're killing off the Force, they've messed up somewhere along the way here.
Oh yeah, nothing in here says they are killing off the Force. That's what all these opinion writers are saying. That's what they think should go forward. Like I said, the Jacobin article, which
who are they? Give me a list of names.
Spencer Kornhaber, the guy who wrote the article that we read, and then
find
Sam
me
Chris.
that man. I want to pants him.
But no, I mean, like the Jacobin article, it's really, like I said, like explicit, and it forces down the idea of that, like the Force is evil, like the Force is a tool for just people to do bad things. It makes this whole argument, which this is a slight tangent, but something I really want to ask you guys. A big part of the Jacobin article says that there's no, I should also say the Jacobin article comes out just before The Force Awakens comes out. So this is from 2015. And the author, Sam Chris, says that there is no point in the first 6 movies in which they ever say the phrase the light side. I looked into this, and from just random nonsense that I found online, other people seem to agree with this. And now I wanted to ask you guys what you think about that, but they posit this as the light side does not exist. It's just implied by the explicit mention of the dark side. And they make the idea that basically saying, perspective is what it takes. And no matter what perspective you take on a side of good versus evil, the other side will always see you as evil. So they make this whole thing, this argument that the Force is something that's drowning Star Wars down in these perspective problems. And then it ends with them saying, literally in the Jacobin article, to get back to their politics, they say mass awakening as opposed to mass consciousness is a notion with unavoidable fascist overtones. So like I said, Jacobin has some issues, but there's some ideas there.
I mean, like let's first settle down and acknowledge that the light side is explicitly referenced in the original trilogy as in one specific line as the good side, which is brutal, I know, but like that's exactly what it means, right? I mean, and it was so cringe-worthy even back in the early 80s that they decided to stop it all right there. So Luke says that he believes he can turn Vader back to the quote-unquote good side.
Okay.
It does have it, and I mean, it's literally, I think they probably recorded that with him saying the light side, but decided that was even weirder.
Okay. Yeah, that was something I had no idea of. What I did find is that from like some random Stack Exchange post was that the first time the phrase the light side was ever used in Star Wars media was season 3, episode 16 of Star Wars: The Clone Wars. I didn't double check that or anything, but you guys are the experts on that.
Yeah, probably in the same episode as the only time slave one is ever said. Yeah.
Perfect.
All right, Chris.
I just wanted to highlight, while that Jacobin article is so, aggressive, saying that, like I said, the title of the article is Smash the Force. I think the article, our topic article of the day, the Atlantic one, I think this gets at something very similar, because at first I was getting a little confused. I was like, why would they cite this article, when this was way before The Mandalorian, this was just before The Force Awakens comes out. I kind of found it really interesting that the finale of this Atlantic article is Spencer Kornhaber talking about how great The Mandalorian is, like gushing over the storytelling and the narrative and saying things like, I love there's a 10-minute no dialogue sequence of just the Mandalorian surviving. And I love that, we have this odd couple dynamic between him and Baby Yoda. And it even ends with him saying, like, I think the last paragraph is he's like,
hold on. Can you repeat that, please?
Do you want me to say Big Whiskey?
Thank you.
Okay, yes. I was trying to stay true to the article. I don't say Big Whiskey in there, unfortunately. But
we all know what you're talking about.
Yes. That last paragraph of the article, he says, my favorite part in The Mandalorian in all 2 seasons is when, the Mandalorian has to deal with that creature that's carrying her unhatched eggs. An episode that I have not seen. But everything he gushes about The Mandalorian, every single thing he talks about what is good in Star Wars has nothing to do with the Force. And I find that wildly interesting, that I think the sequel trilogy was so Force heavy, and all these different articles I read, they're saying, the stuff we really love about modern Star Wars has nothing to do with the Force. And so I started to get this sense that they were saying we need to smash the Force to regain Star Wars, which is something I don't fully understand. But that was what I took away from it, Zach. Thank you for giving me some time to talk. I have nothing to say about Lego. I'll throw that in there too.
All right, Chris, what is your take? You can respond to Rob later, but what is your take on these articles?
Well, I think it is rather selective, obviously, what Mr. Midnight's Edge selected to talk about. And he sort of cherry-picked quotes from the article that support the continued narrative that Kathleen Kennedy is, in fact, Satan himself. I think it's naive almost to sort of believe that someone else in the same environment would have made way better choices. I think that The Mandalorian is here's really why The Mandalorian is anything, in my opinion. Someone with a pedigree made a compelling pitch, and because of that pedigree, they trusted that person's judgment. And he was the first person to do that who had the same kind of resume. Maybe Favreau was the first person to do that who had that level of resume that they were able to say, you know what? Let's stop thinking about this and just trust this guy because he's done things that have worked. I think that's all it comes down to. I think that it's just any other person with those same sort of corporate pressures would have made similar choices. You're telling me I can't trust J.J. Abrams to deliver a compelling film? What do you mean? Look at these numbers. It's more of a commentary on who the average audience member is than Kathleen Kennedy. It's an indictment of the average audience member, the fact that we got the sequel trilogy, in my opinion. It's like they know who their audience is. They're not the people who are writing about what a narrative disaster that trilogy was.
Okay, that's a Chris Porteous take that I should have expected, but I it's provocative, but I wasn't prepared for that. All right, Joe, before you answer, because I think at this point your opinion on Star Wars is kind of the most murkiest of the three when it comes to listeners. What did you think of the sequel trilogy? And when you respond to that, tell me what your favorite film of the sequel trilogy is and your least favorite.
You can say none.
No, The Force Awakens, what I thought was was the best out of the three. The worst was The Last Jedi. And Rise of Skywalker.
Blasphemy.
Vain attempt to try and win back the people that like The Force Awakens.
Okay. So with that being said, what are your takeaways from all this?
Well, from the article, from what I read it, they gave a nice little synopsis of what George Lucas thought when he made the original trilogy. And what you can glean from the article is the whole reason why she got the job was because they thought that she knew what George Lucas would do. And it's obvious that she didn't, because earlier in the article they were talking about how he wanted to do it similar to a Flash Gordon show and mix all of these different elements into it. And the plot holes that he had in the story but didn't really care about because he could always fill them up later. And that's where you get most of that's where you get a lot of the fan fiction. You get a lot of the novels from those throwaway lines, the dark times of the rebellion, when they were talking, when Obi-Wan was talking in episode 4. the dark times. He wrote a whole trilogy off of that, the prequels. But people were always fascinated with it. What is he talking about? What is he talking about? It was something that people, when they were paying attention to the movies, they gravitated towards. And it actually helped him out in the end, because he was able to make 3 more movies about what happened beforehand. But she was always worried about the story. And Lucas wasn't, they said in the article, Lucas wasn't always interested in the story. And that's where the big disconnect is that here you have a person that you think is going to be of the same mold as Lucas, and it just didn't pan out. I think it's like almost buyer's remorse at this point, where what they're trying to do is trying to find a way to just let her go, and hopefully she bows out gracefully and doesn't put up a fight.
All right, now this is okay. Zenger, again, once I start, I'm not going to stop. So based on what everybody's kind of told you, what is your takeaway from this? What is, have you at least tried to skim the article in the last 5 minutes, or have you just been soaking in, kind of marinating in what everybody else has been saying?
Column A, column B.
Okay, so what's of course I wouldn't have it any other way, Zenger. We should everybody know that you were too busy riding your bike around for you to do the required reading.
Yes. Yeah.
No,
sure.
I was
Let's go with that.
going to say, Zach, I'm glad that you gave both a text-based and a video-based medium for everybody here, because we know some of us can't read.
That's a deep cut Knights of Vader reference. The fact that only Rob can read. So Zenger, what is your take on all this? I know we've talked about it a lot. This podcast at this point can almost be called the current state of Star Wars.
It's just flames everywhere. Everything's on fire, and for some reason, there's wolves everywhere. Oh God, why are there so many wolves? Anyways, so my opinion on what's been done with this article and what we've been talking about, we're all shocked all of a sudden that Mandalorian's done good, big movie do bad. That's, I feel like what the thing is with this. Everyone loves Mandalorian, everyone is upset with the movie. So I mean, what we've been going through this whole rigmarole since when? How long has it been now? 2018, 19.
Yeah, basically the very end of 2017, Kathleen Kennedy became Satan.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, does the sequel trilogy ruin Star Wars for me? No. Does the Mandalorian make me love Star Wars again? Yes. Do I have an issue with those things existing together? No. Sorry to give a boring answer.
Zenger, are you giving a diplomatic answer? I'm not sure if I can permit that on this podcast.
No, because I mean, it's just I just, everyone's blaming Kathleen Kennedy. I'm like, well, it's obvious, and the only solution to this problem is we redo the sequel trilogy. Yeah, that's gonna go over great. That's gonna go over fantastic. Let me know how that goes. Oh wait, exactly. I've got good news. It doesn't go well. So,
all right. So
there, I did a thing. I had an opinion. Back to looking at Legos.
I love you, Zenger.
Thank
you. Zenger, you should have said I know. As you go into the carbon freeze. Okay, so this is my take on all this. First and foremost, as somebody who's never stopped beating the drum of, the sequel trilogy was unequivocally financially successful. The only quote unquote bomb is Solo. And that was because Lucasfilm had no control over schedule placement of that, and the fact that they didn't know how. Once again, Lucasfilm doesn't market these movies. Disney, as in the studio, does. And the marketing for all of these films, except for maybe The Force Awakens, was lackluster to normies. But this is the thing that bothers me when it comes to not just the article, but Midnight's Edge and all these other just armchair analysts, is that Kathleen Kennedy greenlit The Mandalorian and hired the people that are currently involved with it. So for the same reason why The Last Jedi is cultural cancer, you have to give her the credit of The Mandalorian. She is just as much behind that as she is The Last Jedi.
Do I have to? Or can I just continue to not care?
Well, you can do both because that's what the internet does.
Sweet.
The internet's great. It's just like kind of like cherry picking its arguments.
But
and this,
there's a flip.
Hold
There's
on. Let me finish my piece. Then everybody can dogpile. This is the thing too with Lucas. We're holding Lucas on this pedestal for how great the original trilogy was, and just like how Lucas was this master storyteller that could do no wrong. And yet we still live in the current environment, maybe not as toxic as it was in the late 2000s, but Lucas gave us the prequels. We cannot say that the original trilogy was this masterwork when to this day there are people out there that still say the only two good Star Wars films are Star Wars and Empire. Like, remember, there is the argument there that Jedi is a subpar film. That's the thing that I can't get. We cannot say Lucas is this genius and then completely disregard that the prequels exist. And all the other kind of nonsense that he did was like everything else that he made that was non-Star Wars related. That's the thing that kind of bothers me the most about all this analysis is that the blatant hypocrisy of it and the cherry picking of arguments is that, like, you cannot say Kathleen Kennedy is a disaster when she is responsible for The Mandalorian. We cannot do that because for the same reason why we hold Cowboy Hat Man in such high regard, she also could very easily have demoted him and pushed him out of the company, yet she chose not to. For the same reason why we congratulate her for bringing Jon Favreau into this. She also brought Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams into this. You cannot separate the two. The same thing goes for Lucas. You cannot say he's the master storyteller when he gave us both the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy. It's like anything in life. These people have their ups and their downs. I personally think Lucas never had it down. I think the prequel trilogy stands on the same totem as the original trilogy. I think the sequel trilogy, 10 years later, will finally be looked upon as the best. I forget who it was of you guys who said it, but like it's the best that could have been done. Probably I think it was Zenger. It was the idea like there's never going to be you're never going to make a fantastic 7, 8, 9. There's too much cultural just baggage that comes with Star Wars at that point. You're never going to be able to please everybody. And this goes back to the argument too, is that the Force, if everybody remembers December 2015 and January 2016, The Force Awakens was the greatest thing that ever existed. If everybody forgets the reviews from that time, the headline was best Star Wars since Empire. And that was the same thing that followed Rogue One. Best Star Wars since Empire. And that's another aspect of this. We're forgetting that Rogue One, which I find fascinating in this Atlantic article, says The Mandalorian is the best Star Wars product since 1980. And we forget Rogue One is unequivocally considered the greatest Star Wars product of like post 1980.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
And that's the thing too, is that like we can't, like, again, Kathleen Kennedy's responsible for Rogue One. You can say, oh well, yeah, she hired Gareth Edwards who screwed it up. We do not know what the screwed up version of Rogue One looks like. And two, she hired Tony Gilroy, who guess what, cleaned it up. And she kept him in the fold for Calrissian Andor, aka Cassian Andor. So like, I don't get this argument that Kathleen Kennedy is the harbinger of doom when she's responsible for both Rogue One and The Mandalorian. Like, I just don't get this. Like for the same reason why that Rian Johnson single-handedly, quote unquote, drove Star Wars into the ground, and she's somehow responsible for that. Well, then at the same time, she's single-handedly responsible for pulling it back up with The Mandalorian. So let the dog pile proceed.
So wait a second. Oh wait, I completely lost my train of thought. Someone else go.
Oh my!
I had
God,
something
sponsored by
and it
Surfshark.
Yeah.
Time for an ad break, guys.
You gotta plug
Can I
somebody
please
there.
mention? I love it. I love it so much. Go to Cinemoddities VPN, which will single-handedly allow you to download movies illegally with no trace of the content producers ever finding you.
Don't let everybody else steal your data. Let Cinemoddities steal your data.
That's great.
Don't worry, they don't have enough people to process the data. It's fine.
So,
all right.
So Zach, I had a thought about something that I joked about earlier, and this is something that I think I've heard from you guys
my thing.
from the internet. Well, too late, Zenger. Surfshark.
No, I know. God dang
So in the article, and then what they highlight in the video is they talk about how they want to create a world that you can live in. They don't want to make a movie, they want to make a universe. And at that idea, they say, when you have like the scruff and the dents on things, it makes it more lived in and it makes you feel like you're in it. And in the video, he even specifically talks about how Lucas is dented. They make this weird argument about how he got in a car accident before he started making movies, and so he was dented when he got into filmmaking. And they contrast that to Kathleen Kennedy being the shiny and new version of Star Wars. And that's what I was getting at before, where I say, we all know that Kathleen Kennedy did nothing until they created her to run Star Wars. And I think that's something that, Zach and I have talked about a lot on and off mic, that she's been around forever. She's been with Spielberg. She's been with, tons of different people producing crazy famous movies. But people seem to think producing, yeah. And it seems like, people think she was literally created to make this Star Wars stuff. I don't really see her as the shiny and new version of Star Wars. I think that gets to what you're saying, Zach. She might be picking people who are shinier and newer in the film industry, and she has some hits and she has some misses. I just find it always crazy that all the negative gets dumped on Kathleen Kennedy, like you were saying, and all the positives just go to, Jon Favreau or whoever, makes a good movie or show.
Well, this is the thing I find interesting, is that in this article, and this is one point I really want to highlight, they say how The Mandalorian in the first 4 episodes of the series has captured that perfect lived-in world that is 100% reminiscent of the original trilogy. And as I was listening to this, I'm like, it's a world that isn't just on the screen. It's not 2-dimensional. It is a 3-dimensional, fleshed-out world. And I sat there, I went, I wish I could name just one planet that was introduced in The Mandalorian that wasn't from pre-existing lore. And I go, I couldn't do that if my life depended on it. I couldn't name you one planet that is exclusive to The Mandalorian because and this is yeah, I know, right? Yeah. And this is the thing I find so fascinating, is it shows you how disconnected these people are from reality, and just the facts of the situation. Is that every single time they film a background in The Mandalorian, it's that Mission Impossible level like set dressing where it's just a giant Mylar screen that they have rear projected imagery put on. And I'm like, what you're arguing
Fake
that
sets.
exists. Exactly. For the same reason why we denigrate the prequels for being blue screen, The Mandalorian has taken that to an even further extreme, where at least Lucas had some level of set dressing. Yes, there was extremes like Camino in Attack of the Clones, where it was essentially just green on green with Ewan McDonald looking at like a blue tennis ball, like on like a 10-foot rod.
Granted, but designs that they're still mining to last week on the Bad Batch. But
exactly. But this is the thing that I find so fascinating, is that like the thing that they're lauding The Mandalorian for and denigrating the rest of Star Wars for, it's the antithetical argument of that, in that The Mandalorian's production is literally what they're chastising every other piece of Star Wars of, and it being 2-dimensional, where The Mandalorian is literally at its Star Wars at its most just flat.
This is where I need to rely on your expertise, Zach, because it's like, does commentary from The Atlantic carry the weight that they suppose it does in this video? Like I abhor this universe of content creation, so I have to rely on your judgment in this regard. Like, does The Atlantic carry this weight?
This is the thing I got to give Cameron Pasha, who is the one who we actually see talking in this Midnight's Edge video. When it comes to reading tea leaves, he's pretty good at it, in the sense of like when it comes to like more objective based things. The Atlantic is one of these. It was originally a periodical before periodicals became birdcage dressing. It was one of those things like Time, Newsweek. In that, like, I think it to very specific portions of the country, as in the U.S. or North America, maybe it's still held in high regard. It's definitely something that Hollywood would listen to. When this article came out, it probably raised a couple eyebrows over in Hollywood. I don't know if it holds the amount of weight that Cameron Pasha like gives it. But it is something that definitely is intriguing. And I think that's the thing that's so frustrating with, like, Midnight's Edge is another one of these ones where they're in it for clicks. They're part of the bizarre stupid. They're just Well, yeah, they're in it because they're making money off of it. And the fact they have a sponsor now leads me to believe that they're even making more money on top of just getting into the YouTube algorithm, which is kind of sickening. But it's like everything else in today's world. It's not surprising. But no,
That sponsor read was so jarring, by the way.
Yeah, I know. They do. You should see that because I've watched some of their videos on like the quote unquote He-Man controversies on Netflix, and it gets even worse
He-Man
how jarring.
controversy on Netflix.
Talk about something that has no story.
Yeah. But this is the thing though, is that the Atlantic article is like, he makes a point very late in the video. He's like, the fact that this article comes out of nowhere with no other like major Star Wars announcements kind of like before it or after it is intriguing. That's the one thing I'll give him. It's weird that this is coming out now. We're kind of like, we're in one of those many dry spells for Star Wars, whereas we really don't have any sort of official like talking points coming from Lucasfilm. Again, like I said, it's kind of sad, but the most exciting thing is the fact that they're making like action figures from product that was released 10 to 20 years earlier. That's probably the most valid point he gives in this entire thing, in the sense of like, why this article now? And that's saying, no, he's pretty, I'd say I, for the most part, agree with him. And that the fact that the Atlantic is writing this leads me to believe that there's something going on behind the scenes at Lucasfilm. It's been too quiet over there for a while now. There's got to be something. And plus, I think I mentioned it last week, is that like Kathleen Kennedy has been head of Lucasfilm for almost 10 years now. It's going to be 9 years come this October. It leads me to believe that she's got to be considering some level of retirement. Think about being the head of a subsidiary studio of the Walt Disney Company, regardless of what you think the current state of Lucasfilm is an exhausting job, even if everything is kind of just sunshine and roses. I would imagine she's probably planning her retirement, her and Frank Marshall. It would be ridiculous to think otherwise. They're clearly in an age bracket where it's not absurd to think that they're thinking about retirement. But I do think that the relative prestige of the Atlantic in the, sects that worship periodical-based media still, I think it's warranted.
Okay, so on to like my interpretation of why this is some of the worst takes I've heard in a long while. Like literally, they're literally saying that in no uncertain terms that aesthetic is more important than story when it comes to Star Wars. They're confusing the idea of like a well-motivated, interesting story with a garbage story. Like you can put the same amount of energy into a story that makes no sense as you can to one that's sort of like emotionally driven and like makes sense for those characters. So like you can't just say aesthetics are more important than story. There's like a story that's well motivated and there's a story that's poorly motivated by market research and weird data analytics and whatever they think makes a coherent narrative by today's standards. So you can't like there's literally no space in this interpretation for a story that actually makes sense to a human being watching it and a story that's just nonsense gobbledygook that like some guy told them would be perform well data wise. So like you can't cut out that factor. I think if you went back and listened to some of our older commentaries on Mandalorian episodes, the same thing would come up where it's like it looks and sounds and feels like Star Wars. There's not much of a story going on in the Mandalorian. That's what they're saying now. That's been my opinion the whole time. It's kind of like it sounds and feels right. The aesthetic is right, but there's not a lot happening.
Zach, me and you had a conversation about this when you were talking to me about when The Mandalorian first came on. You know, it was basically Rifleman, the show Rifleman in space in Star Wars. And that's basically what it was. It was an old style Western and it was set in the Star Wars universe. And guess what? It worked. It worked because that's what people wanted at that time. It was something different. It was something new. It wasn't someone, blowing up a giant space station or someone rescuing a princess or anything like that. It was a different format of the same genre people liked in a setting that people were familiar with. And that's what made it click.
I think that to get at both of those points, that's something that I was thinking is that, when I have heard all the rave reviews for The Mandalorian throughout its 2-season run. My thought, especially after reading this article, is, is it a good show? Or is it something that's flimsy that people just finally got something different from Star Wars than they've had in so long that they gravitate towards it?
And it's the difference that's gravitating the people to it. Not only are the fans liking it because, oh, this is a different aspect of something that I already love. This is a different side of me seeing it. We've never seen it where it was like a weekly show. It's great, But the thing is, it's Star Wars started out as a movie. And that's what it was, just one movie. And then it gravitated to all of this.
But it's literally like it's not actively trying to alienate me personally, like the sequel trilogy is. That's literally all it comes down to. Like that's literally the only difference. Like, it's not whether one is all about story and one isn't. It's like the story of the sequel trilogy, like, is sandpaper to my understanding of the first 6 movies. It's just like, what if we let some guy who only thought the Star Wars and Empire were good, like, forget everything about them and like remake a third trilogy based on his like half awake memory of the first 2 movies. That's what it is. It's like when, like, let's bring a music reference into this for, Rob might appreciate this. Way back in 2013, Black Sabbath got back together to make a sort of final record with Ozzy, right? It's going to be the original band pretty much and Ozzy. And the producer, his name escapes me, but he's highly negatively critiqued these days for compressing the dynamic range too much or something like that. But he made them listen to their first 2 albums only for like a month and then make a new album. And, it sounds kind of like if a 70-year-old man made Paranoid in 2013. And, it's just sort of like, it's not trying to add a logical next step to the narrative, much like the sequel trilogy. It's like, try and hit some of those same notes from those ones that no one argues about. And it's not a third chapter. It's trying to hit the same notes. It's not logically including the first 2 chapters and trying to make the next step. It's just trying to reiterate something that went well the last time. And that's the problem with the story of the sequel trilogy. It's not the fact that it has a story that makes it bad, like this article is insinuating. It's the fact that it's not a logical continuation of the narrative. It's throwing out, it's relying on some chapter that you didn't see happening that is, forget whether it's narratively coherent. It's just like, it's not like there's some unseen chapter that just derails all of the sort of emotional intention and progress behind the other 6 movies. It really relies on you to not think about the other 6 movies to watch it and enjoy it. That's the problem.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, and I had that same thought that it was like a they're talking about, is the Mandalorian in this article truly the way to balance the old and the new? Like, can we recapture the feeling of the original trilogy or what they think of Star Wars, but do something that isn't just a rehash of, like you said, the old notes? And I just think that's such a weird thing to even think about, because you like you said, if it's just a rehash, you have to have no knowledge of what came before. But if it's something new, everybody's going to get mad because then it's not the thing that they know and love. It seems like it's almost impossible to balance that.
No follow-up, Chris?
Well, it clearly is borderline impossible. Like, let's just like sum it up. Like, this article tries to cast a little bit of shade. I can't, correct me if I'm wrong, whether it's the article or the Midnight's Edge video, casts a little bit of shade on the critical reception of the prequel trilogy. But like, let's get real. Let's get real for a second, right? Why do I think the prequels are actually good, interesting, and sort of emotionally relevant to the core story of those 6 movies? Because it shows what it speaks a little bit to my core belief in determinism. It shows why you shouldn't judge someone like Darth Vader so horribly for their actions, because you're missing out on all of the terrible, weird things that happen to them that formulated them into this individual. And it doesn't matter whether you can relate to those actions. It doesn't matter whether you think they're well motivated. It's just showing you that if you subject a person to these things, it's going to impact their character in this way. There's more depth in that than anything that happens in the sequel trilogy. I have no clue. Like, people think Vader went crazy over nothing. I have way less of a clue as to why Kylo Ren went crazy, or Luke for that matter. You know what I mean? Like, I have no idea. Like, it's not motivated by anything we see on screen. And that's the weird thing about it. It's just there's this big jump where we don't know how these people became this way, and then we see them doing things that don't make any sense. And it's like I can understand why the prequels are interesting, because it motivates Vader's redemption in Return of the Jedi. It sort of shows why he was a worthwhile person.
But to be fair, though, like, Vader's redemption in Return of the Jedi, there's nothing. Like, this is the thing I find the most interesting about Star Wars, and like the whole, it's like poetry, it rhymes, is that like all of the emotional baggage that Star Wars has from the original trilogy is established in Empire. Like, there's nothing outside of Obi-Wan and Luke's talk in Obi-Wan's hut on Tatooine. There is no real emotional baggage set forth in A New Hope. There really isn't.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing about that, though. Like, is it set deliberately during the production of A New Hope? Maybe not. Probably not. But when you have Obi-Wan's reactions to sort of like, it's almost inconceivable that Vader and Anakin weren't the same person when A New Hope was shot. When you watch that scene, it's like the way he describes him as a good friend, and he reflects on. You just literally see him just like devolving into memories while Luke's looking at this lightsaber. It's like you can't even. And then you have their whole dialogue on the Death Star during their duel. It's shocking if we're to believe that Lucas wasn't thinking about any of that stuff while writing A New Hope.
But this is what I mean. Like ignoring the background. I mean, just exclusively just looking at it from that film's perspective. It's that Empire and Jedi retroactively add a lot of weight to Star Wars, as in 1977. And the prequels obviously do a lot to add to it after the fact. And I think that exact same thing happens with the sequel trilogy. The Force Awakens is a very much to the point film. It's not concerned in adding layers to the lore. And then Last Jedi spends most of its runtime explaining the current state of the galaxy. And then The Rise of Skywalker is trying to then kind of, find like almost like balance between everything that was established in The Last Jedi and everything that was just kind of there in The Force Awakens.
And you've totally distilled the real problem with the sequel trilogy. Here's what it is. It's like the resolution that occurs in Return of the Jedi should be literally, it's like the next day the Star Wars universe ended. And if you want to make another movie, find some place in between or before those 6 movies to place your standalone story. Or if you have the audacity to continue the story, the idea is that the in-universe society has progressed beyond the point of having hilarious stormtroopers once again, and the same exact story playing out. Like it's like whether you like, we don't know the exact details of Lucas's story treatments, but he taught, like, the few comments he's made about it indicate that there's the sort of core arc to that would be some sort of greater revelation about the reality of the Force and what it is. That's something that would be sort of a worthwhile ideological narrative progression to the first 2 trilogies. That's sort of like Luke and the New Jedi Order, like, amidst some menial struggle against the underworld, discover some next level of revelation about how the Force works, and presumably in that 3rd film there would be some sort of worthwhile evolution of using the Force that would be interesting in some way. And instead we got like the sort of exact same sort of political narrative structure that we have in the original trilogy after like the work of throwing off that sort of government, for lack of a better word. It's not an ideological next step. So place it somewhere during the timeline, because they didn't have an idea good enough to add a third note to those first two notes.
That okay, there's a lot to kind of unpack there. I don't know. Like, remember the biggest, like, if you're okay, this is the thing too. We got to be, it's not just I and a lot of people crap on Disney. We also have to be fair to them. Like, this also has to be commercial. And considering that remember, Disney also bought the argument that the prequel trilogy was bad. Remember, when they went into The Force Awakens, the first thing they did, and at that point it was just episode 7, was they canceled Star Wars Detours, RIP, right, Zenger?
Yeah.
And then the immediate next action was no more like prequel trilogy 3D. Like, no, we don't want people thinking about prequel trilogy. We want to live exclusively in the world of the original trilogy. Like, let the past die, kill it if you have to. And that was the edict from Lucasfilm, like, come 2013. That came with the EU purge. It came with all that. So the idea of them looking at like Lucas's alleged treatments of the sequel trilogy and like, oh, this is supposed to kind of like delve into even further deconstructing the spirituality of the Force. There was never a universe they would do that with. Even now, I think you'd be very hard pressed to find a Lucasfilm that would want to go into that.
That's fine. I believe you and agree with you, because that's the terrible world we live in. It's wrong though. That's all I'm saying.
But this, like I said, not to delve too far away from the topic at hand, in that Kathleen Kennedy equals Satan. Do we agree? Yes or no? It boils down to everybody. It's getting more and more profound how nobody has I don't even want to say objective or subjective understanding of Star Wars. It's coming down to just a realistic understanding of Star Wars. And that's the thing that kind of frustrates me as a Star Wars fan. And I'm kind of delighted that for the most part, the fandom doesn't care anymore. But this kind of brings it down to another point I kind of want to discuss, in that everybody keeps saying the success of The Mandalorian, that rhetoric. We don't know how successful, or if The Mandalorian is even successful, because those numbers, those viewership numbers, in whatever sort of just quantitative measure that Lucasfilm Disney has for what is considered success of a streaming service program, we don't know. And this is where I kind of want to delve into, I kind of like tap into Rob's like understanding more of like as a statistician, is that, or maybe even almost like a quasi like actuarial science individual, is that like, how do we measure the success of something when, and this even goes down to Disney as well, how do we measure the success of something in which we don't have numbers for it? Whereas like, if we want to measure the success of the sequel trilogy, we can at least look at things like box office numbers and be like, oh, the Rise of Skywalker made $1.07 billion. The Last Jedi made $1.3 billion. The Force Awakens made $2.06 billion. And we can at least point at that and be like, here is a number that is accepted by the industry as to this is how much this thing grossed. We don't know we don't know the numbers on The Mandalorian, for better or worse. We don't know. Like, it could be averaging 1 million viewers per episode, 10 million viewers per episode, 500,000 viewers per episode. We don't know how successful The Mandalorian is. I'm sorry. Thank you, Zenger.
Yeah, that's something that's always wildly interested me, and I think it gets it what this article's going for as well is that you're right. We don't have those numbers from Disney Plus. I don't think we're ever going to have those numbers from Disney Plus. You know, they might throw out some number like you hear on Netflix or Hulu where some new movie comes out and they say this was watched by every person alive or dead, you know, in the first hour of its release. And it's just like, that's almost meaningless. I think the thing that gives me the biggest problem in that comparison is that when they say it in this article, I've heard it before, they throw all this hate at Kathleen Kennedy and talk about how, you know, she mismanaged the sequel trilogy. And they put all maybe, you know, The Mandalorian is good because everybody's talking about it on Twitter or on, you know, meme websites and Reddit, who knows. But the thing, you know, that you made me think of, Zach, is that, you know, in this article, and like I said, elsewhere I've seen, they say, oh, the sequel trilogy came out to diminishing returns. Like, you know, in the sense that the third made less than the second, made less than the first. And so they say, well, did Star Wars lose its mojo or did they mismanage the property? This made me think, well, if you look back at the original trilogy, that did the same thing. The first made the most, the second made the second most, the third made the least. What really surprised me is that the prequel trilogy is the only one to break this pattern. It goes, so Phantom Menace made the most, Episode 3 made the second most, and Episode 2 made the least. So if they want to use the metric of diminishing returns as mismanaged, then by that logic, the only not mismanaged trilogy was the prequel trilogy. That's why I think just relying on that metric is so misleading when you're just looking at, you know, Kathleen Kennedy. When we can't even compare the things in Star Wars today that are well received. And I don't think we can compare, you know, previous TV shows or any extent like that as well. You know what I mean?
Well, one thing I do want to say, Rob, is that the original trilogy did rebound with Jedi. Empire is the lowest grossing film of the original trilogy.
Oh, you guys would know better than I have, but that was not what I found on the internet today. Just saying.
Okay. That's okay. Yeah. Return of the Jedi did rebound. And that's what makes The Rise of Skywalker almost an anomaly in all this. And that it was the only time a Star Wars trilogy's final installment did not rebound. But it also points again, it goes going back to the actual numbers of this. If you also have to look at this too, is the fact that like we look at the sequel trilogy, and the sequel trilogy weren't the only Star Wars films released in theaters. Yeah. You have The Force Awakens, and this has been one of my favorite arguments of all time, and I will never get tired of this. Is that like, and this shows how nobody wants to talk about the factual information. Force Awakens releases in December 2015. Worldwide does $2.07, a number that nobody expected. Disney didn't even expect that. Far exceeded their expectations. And then the very next year, Rogue One comes out. That Chris has even agreed with me is considered one of the unequivocally most lauded Star Wars projects to ever exist. Not like niche on a Clone Wars level, but as a mainstream blanket level. So I'm going to ask Joe, Mr. Joe. Joe, do you like Rogue One?
Rogue One is awesome.
There you go. And guess what? Rogue One makes literally half as much money as The Force Awakens, $1.05 billion. So
But that's the thing is, you know, you have to realize where your demographics coming from. I'm in my mid-40s. All right, I grew up with the original trilogy. You know, watching them get the Death Star plans before Episode 4 was like candy for me. That's the whole thing. It was nostalgia. But that's why it has a special place in my heart.
Sure, but once again, this is a new story with for the most part new characters outside of a couple fan favorites sprinkled in like Tarkin and Vader. It's a new story, but again, this is the point of this is to get back to box office numbers and the fact that just like mass audiences. Like I've always said, Disney doesn't care about what the nerds think.
You're right, Zach. I just want to correct myself. You are absolutely right. I was looking at worldwide, the prequel's the only one that bounced back. Domestic, the original trilogy did bounce back. You're right.
Yes. And when it comes to like inflation with worldwide numbers of films from the 70s and 80s, that is a very hard route to navigate. I don't even know how to navigate
Good point.
that.
Yeah, I was looking at worldwide, but you're absolutely right, Zach. Domestic is then yes. But that's another that whole conversation. Sorry.
Sure. But this is the thing I find fascinating about once again, because even in this Midnight's Edge video, Cameron Pasha references that the focal point, or I guess the linchpin, is The Last Jedi. That's what destroyed Star Wars. The Last Jedi single-handedly destroyed Star Wars. And this is my
Says who?
favorite. Well, idiots on the internet.
Name
This is
name
my-
some of them. I'm gonna go pan some.
Hey, come on.
Joe Yazzo.
I'm gonna go pan some.
I mean,
I'd
I'm not
wear a
I'm not
belt
super
if I
far
were
behind.
you.
But this is my favorite point, though, and I want Rob to answer this, is him being the statistician here. We have Force Awakens, $2.07 billion. Rogue One, $1.05 billion. The Last Jedi, $1.3 billion. Explain that, Rob. Well, does that show diminished return? Like, how would you, if this was a project and you were asked to analyze this, what would be your interpretation of it? Like, what would be the like, if you're explaining to a layman numbers wise, how would you explain that sort of dip both quantitatively and qualitatively?
Well, I think there's definitely something between the correlation in the order in which they come out and the public. When I say public, I mean kind of the mass audiences of these things, because of course, just like you just said, I think, and also critically, review-wise, The Force Awakens was so well received. It was such a huge movie. It seemed to be some revitalization of Star Wars, as they said, and things like that. I think when, we get to Rogue One and we get to, this being the next movie that Disney is releasing, I would imagine that this mass public that I'm describing, who are not you guys and not me, I'm talking about the people who are like confused when Darth Maul shows up at the end of Solo, that type of thing, like the people who just go see the movies. I would have to imagine, in some things I have read before, that when Rogue One was being marketed, a lot of people thought that was Episode 8. I think there was a big chunk of audiences that thought just because it was next, that is the next big installment that was going to continue The Force Awakens that they loved. So there's a lot of, riding the coattails of Force Awakens.
I've heard firsthand accounts of people who were confused if Jyn was Rey. You're not wrong.
So I feel like there's some correlation there. And when they realize that there is this kind of, interjection in the series, in the established order that they're used to from the movies, at least, that causes some maybe confusion in this mass public that I'm describing, that when you finally do get to The Last Jedi, there's some confusion of, oh, we have another one, maybe some fatigue or something like that. And I think there is some big, correlation between this interjection, like I said, of Rogue One, where it caused a lot of people to stop riding the coattails. And then, of course, when The Last Jedi comes out, I feel like the word of mouth is just so much. This is so different from what we got from the first one, from the first two, if you count, Rogue One, that it doesn't have that energy to move forward. And so I think there's such a quantitative drop off because that, Disney almost, put a roadblock with these people who, thought we were going to just get the next three movies and that was going to be one big, Star Wars story. And instead we get this jumping around in the timeline and things of that nature.
Yeah, how do you
that's the thing. But the thing I want to ask Rob, though, and I think he went like almost in the way too into the Star Wars fan base level of this. But this is my question, though, is that like looking at this just solely from a numbers perspective, it's the idea that qualitative argument is the sequel trilogy ruined Star Wars. I think that's fair to say. That is both not just the major argument of the Atlantic article, but also of the Midnight's Edge piece, considering that Midnight's Edge has almost exclusively lived off Kathleen Kennedy equals Satan for 2+ years now. It's the idea that if you look at the numbers of every Disney Star Wars film released, it's the sequel trilogy film that has rebounded the franchise, because you go from $2.2 billion to $1 billion, then to 1.3, which is a sequel trilogy film, to then the sub $400 million film that was Solo, to then $1 billion, which is The Rise of Skywalker. Because qualitatively speaking, we can say the sequel trilogy is what buoyed Disney Star Wars for the latter half of the 2010s. Is that a wrong thing to take from that, Rob?
No, definitely not. I mean, just from the numbers, absolutely, those are the ones that make the most and keep people seem most interested in.
Sure. So I get once again. Hold on a sec, Chris. You'll have your chance to respond to all this. So would it be, because again, Rob, you are somebody who's based solely in numbers as an individual. To say that the sequel trilogy is what destroyed Star Wars based on the numbers, that is a disingenuous argument, yes or no?
Based on the numbers, it could be a little disingenuous, but this is where it gets tricky, and getting back to what you said about how we have no comparative metric with The Mandalorian, the numbers are, I don't think what any people on the internet, like this article is saying, well, they might use as something to bolster their argument. It's all coming down to these more, like Chris was saying, story versus aesthetic. It's coming down to these more, categorical things. This how many, what's trending when we get with Star Wars and stuff like that. I definitely think there's a blend there. But no, you can't. You're not wrong, especially with just the way the numbers pan out. That these movies are huge.
But this is the thing though, is that and this goes down to credibility in journalism, and I can't put enough quotation marks around the word journalism, so I'm not even going to try. Is that Rob, if you were writing a paper on this, would you, again, if you were asked and your conclusion was if you're writing an article on or a paper and it was on the success of Disney's sequel trilogy, if your conclusion was based on listing all these numbers to say the sequel trilogy was a failure for the Walt Disney Company, wouldn't you look at that and be like, well, that is a false conclusion to draw from all this?
Solely based on the numbers, and actually if there was some way to do research into, profit margins and things like that, then no, I don't. I mean, I haven't done any of that research, but I don't think that, there's a huge, it had to have made the money, not just in, the box office of the movies, but all the tie-in things such as merchandise and licensing and things of that nature. But that's where, if you really want to do this well, I think there would be a, monetary kind of measurement or metric that we're using, and that would have to take into account with some correlation of social media traction. I think that's a huge part of it, which is why when I read these articles, I think that's what most of their arguments are based on. That's why I keep hedging with this. But you're right, based on the numbers, you can calculate that.
But that's the thing that frustrates me though, is about and again, people like Midnight Edge, like we said, they're grifters, they're charlatans, they're there to just make a buck off of just angry fans, disenchanted fans. I don't even want to say angry, disenchanted fans. The problem that makes me mad, this is where I want to kind of shift focus from Rob to Chris, because Chris has his finger on the pulse of a lot of Star Wars fans. Don't you find it fascinating that there's so many fans out there? They're neither huge fans of the sequel trilogy, neither haters of it, yet they're just so inclined to believe whatever narrative that's dangled in front of their face.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the state of modern understanding of pop culture. It's like I was saying before that if we don't have numbers for The Mandalorian, then we would have to rank its success by like I said, how much is trending, what's getting on Twitter, how many Reddit replies is it or posts is it talking about. That's much harder to measure. But it seems like that's what's become the metric of how good something is is The Mandalorian a good show because you can post a meme of Big Whiskey and it'll stay on the front page for, more than an hour, which is insane. It's just the strangest thing to me.
Yeah. And that's the thing where I have to ask Chris is that again, this goes back to, again, more of almost like an anecdotal argument. Why is it that the fandom, and when I mean fandom, I mean just kind of the ones that don't really have, again, they're just fans. They really don't have a stake in this argument. But why is it they're so much more inclined to believe the more hostile argument than the argument that can be proven with numbers?
Because it's I don't see. Star Wars must have blinded you in some way, Zach. I must say because here's for anyone if anyone is wondering, if anyone ever feels compelled to use the box office numbers as a means of justification for the fact that the sequel trilogy must not really be that bad, narratively speaking, I got one word for you: Avatar. It's
okay.
bland.
Continue.
Yeah, it's bland. It's bland stuff. It's like here's how I would rank it. as I'm a very secular person. I don't believe in the existence of a soul, but if I were here's how I would rank Star Wars movies. The original trilogy has a soul, the prequel trilogy has a soul, Rogue One has a soul, the sequel trilogy does not have a soul. I'm not I think Mandalorian has a soul. And when I say that, I say I'm talking about when I'm watching it, do I feel like the slightest bit of like an actual emotional connection to this narrative content? And that's really what it boils down to for me. I don't think box office numbers are not going to tell you that. I felt
Go
more
ahead, Rob,
watching
go
Rogue
loose.
One than
go-
I did
go on,
watching
Rob.
Avatar.
No, I
Come on.
think Chris makes a really good point there. Is because Zach, we're everybody's talking about was the sequel trilogy a success or a failure, and I think it comes down to, well, which metric do you want to use? If we're talking as fans, I think I'm siding more with Chris as, are they good movies? Are they good stories? Do I want to watch those movies? And that's a much more categorical type of metric that we'd have to use. That's really tough to get a handle on. That would need to take that social media into account. But if you're from the perspective of Disney, then I'm with you, Zach. It's totally the numbers. I mean, they might care a good bit about how these movies are received, but if they're going to keep turning a profit and people are going to keep seeing them, then that's all the numbers are going to care about. But Chris, you make a really good point. You're absolutely right. Just how much money the movie makes has no impact on if it's a good film or not. I know a bunch of films that I love that made no money, and I'm like the only person to ever buy the Blu-ray type of thing. So it's that matter of perspective that is a huge thing. And why I was saying also it'd be really interesting to combine them, which I'm sure some division of Disney is trying to do at this point.
But this, again, going back to Avatar, and Avatar is the best example of all this.
Yes.
Maybe not as great as it once was, but it still kind of is. Is that, like, again, $2-point-something billion worldwide. I don't care what Twitter thinks. Avatar was popular. As Rob knows, and I think I've laid out a couple of times now, I'm either Knights of Vader or Cinemoddities. Nobody rode the hype train as hard as I did for Avatar in the fall of 2009. Tell them, Rob, you were there. You were a physical witness to Zach on the Avatar hype train. And I've never been so disappointed in a film. I will never forget to the day I die. Rob and I were at Avatar opening day. Movie ends, credits begin. We have Leona Lewis singing some song, like it was like Avatar's version of Titanic, where it was like, my Navi tail will live on forever. And I'm just like, I remember Rob and I looked to Rob, and I'll never forget. Rob turns back to me and goes, as he does like the handshaking notion. And I remember Rob called his father, because we were both under the age of 18 at the time. And he's like, and then Rob's just like, I didn't like it. But Rob's father was like, what's Zach think? He's the opinion I care about. And I'm like, greatest film of all time, because I was in such denial, because in the subsequent weeks after that film was released, I had to lie to people about that film because I was so afraid of just like, oh God, I hyped this up so much to myself. Avatar,
much like Zenger hyped up that one Valerian, the House of a Thousand Corpses, or whatever the that was called.
I hope that's the sequel. They give Rob Zombie the next Valerian movie.
No, Zenger, your movie you hyped up was Ready Player One. That was the film.
I think I was petitioning for that to be like done and like canceled.
Remember that universe in which Valerian is actually probably a better movie than Avatar?
That's neither here nor there. The point being is Jimmy C made a $2-point-something billion film. That is the point of this. I don't care what internet culture thinks. That was a successful.
Point out one thing real quick. When you said we called Rob's dad, I was about to be like, to buy you guys alcohol to wash away the misery of watching the movie.
No, well,
how was the movie? We need a drink.
But this is like, I don't want to bring family into this too much though. But like Rob and I have talked a lot on Cinemoddities about Rob's dad, and that like Rob's dad is like the perfect general moviegoer, and that like Rob and I will talk, like we will crap on like general blockbusters, and his father will turn around and be like, yeah, I really like that movie. And that is, and Rob, tell me if I'm wrong, because I don't want to bring your father into this.
No, you're absolutely right.
We voice his opinion.
He's the best example of, like I said before, the mass public I was discussing are the people who are confused at the end of Solo when Darth Maul shows up. My dad is the perfect example of, if I have to think during a movie, I'm not enjoying it.
And that's the thing, is that like Avatar made $2 billion. I don't care how much the internet, quote unquote, hates Avatar. And as somebody who hates Avatar, I'm allowed to say this. Avatar 2 and 3, I can't speak for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 like Jimmy C has planned, but Avatar 2 will be a smash. I don't know how much of the diminished returns of that will be because of the pandemic. Every movie is having diminished returns because of the pandemic. But if Avatar 2 was released in a different universe where the pandemic didn't happen, it would be a smash film. Because guess what? It was a barn burner of a film that's to this day only like second or third in line of like highest grossing film of all time, both domestically and internationally. And that's the thing where I get so frustrated with internet discourse. And that's kind of the overall thesis of this conversation, is that like Avatar made 2-point-something billion worldwide, but its merchandise sales were in the toilet. Like I can imagine Chris could probably give you a very, very easy number to be like, when you go to like flea markets and toy shows, nobody is selling Avatar merchandise because nobody cares. But yet at the same...
Yeah, 100% correct. I mean, I remember what they look like, but that's from like 15 years ago, whatever it was. Yeah.
Exactly. But if you go and look, and I know Chris has said this on this very podcast, if you try to buy Rise of Skywalker merchandise, guess what? It's being sold at the premium because people are interested in it. And that's the thing that's so frustrating about just gauging the interest in this sort of thing. And where we, like, again, whether you like Kathleen Kennedy or you hate her, she's in the same boat as we are, yet she has an infinite more amount of like data.
Money.
Yes, but just as much data that is telling her the same amount of things that it's telling us. In that, like, oh, the internet hates the Rise of Skywalker, yet it's merchandise now on the secondhand market is at a premium, and the film was a financial success. Yes, are there diminished returns, but it was a financial success. And yet I don't know how...
which is why we're doomed as a culture, but continue.
No, I
yes,
think
Chris, everything sucks.
I love what
Movies
both
suck.
of you were absolutely. Check out Cinemoddities for that every week. but I think I love what both of you guys are saying, is that you have these two metrics, like we've been saying, the financial and the narrative, I guess, is the best way to just summarize it. And all this internet discourse combines them in an unprofessional and uncombinable way. It's like they choose, one thing that, like, I don't like this movie and the internet doesn't like this movie. And then, we have some numbers to back it up. They're making the wrong assumptions and combining them, I think, to some extent. And that's why we're doomed as a culture, that you shouldn't be combining those things.
But I think it comes down to, like, it's disingenuous. And I think that's the problem I have with, like, the internet now. And it's not just with the internet. Like, again, I don't blame Midnight's Edge. They're making a buck off this. Like, they have every right to do that. For the record, I've said this before in years past. I do not want anybody deplatformed. I don't want anybody regulated. I believe in freedom of speech, for better or worse. Well, I have
the internet.
Exactly. But the problem I have, this goes back to kind of the question that Chris didn't answer for me. Why is it that the casual Star Wars fans, why do they believe the narrative that sequel trilogy bad, Mandalorian good?
Because they watched the sequel trilogy.
Is the sequel...
Okay.
Okay, but this is the question I have for Chris now, as a diehard Star Wars fan. Is the sequel trilogy any worse than the episode of The Mandalorian where we have like a confused, awkward looking Pedro Pascal watching Bill Burr shoot an Imperial officer? Like, is the sequel trilogy any worse in that moment?
It's not, but you're asking, like, I know this is going to sound ridiculous, like, given what anyone on this panel of people knows about me, but you're asking a preposterously objective person right now. And no, they're both equally bad. There are some parts of The Mandalorian that are somewhat better than the sequel trilogy in various aspects. But The Mandalorian is, in my humble opinion, more or less rather ho-hum and average. And there's a few interesting moments across 2 seasons. That is summed up more than I got out of the sequel trilogy, and it never made me really question what they were doing. There's some dumb stuff in there, but they didn't like do weird stuff with the the problem with the sequel trilogy for me is it's called episodes 7, 8, and 9, and it's narratively not episodes 7, 8, and 9. It's narratively a reboot.
Is it though? Like, can you like honestly say The Last Jedi is a reboot?
It is, though. It's like we're literally starting from square one with the Empire again, because the audience is so dumb that they confuse the First Order with the Empire. It's J.J. Abrams says audience dumb. We need Captain Kirk and Spock in here because nobody knows what's going on besides that. And we're gonna have Stormtrooper. Like, it's just not episode 7, 8, and 9. It's a remake of something. It's a remake, reimagining, start over with some of their same old actors for some reason, because some segment of the audience will remember who they are, but not remember what happened in those movies.
I have a question. Now, you think that the 7, 8, and 9 would have been better if they actually labeled them as episode 20, 21, and 23?
If they did that, but they didn't if they took place in a completely different time period and didn't reference directly original trilogy characters, then maybe.
I think that would have worked, because this way they didn't have to hold on to. I think it was too late to do a sequel from the original trilogy. It was too late. The actors were too old, and you could sit there and do standalone stories with them. It would have worked much better.
Joe, I've never agreed more with anything you've ever said. It was
something like that. I think that would have been a little bit better and a little bit easier for people to swallow. The one thing that bothered me about the sequel trilogy, besides using the old characters, Han, Leia, Chewie, was that it was disjointed. You had, when you sit there and you look at the original trilogy and even the prequels, you could almost follow it going straight through. You have one that was almost like Star Wars in Force Awakens, but then next thing you know, it totally turns Star Wars on its ear with The Last Jedi. Total different tone. There was no continuation. Yeah, Rey was getting her Jedi training and everything like that. Yeah, that was some continuation of the story, but it didn't push the narrative far enough. It was too much stuff was happening in too little of time in that movie.
Exactly. It's more of a creatively bankrupt episode 10, 11, and 12 rather than a 7, 8, 9. It's like if they just, you know what I mean? It's like there's too much missing in between for it to be 7, 8, and 9, and whatever happened in between did nothing to progress the story in an interesting way. It's just weird.
No. It's the Aftermath trilogy books. I mean,
it's the Thrawn trilogy, and I'll never accept anything else. It's fine. I'm set in my ways. No, but but that's after the Aftermath trilogy, Zenger. I'm glad you brought it up. The Aftermath trilogy is what you come up with when you realize that it's 2014 and Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, and Harrison Ford aren't getting any younger. So we're going to make this movie, and then we're going to fill in the gaps later on in a way that sort of links up to it. But their end goal is linking up to Force Awakens.
I mean, Zach, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like when I read those books, I'm like, they threw so much out there that they're like, just cast the widest possible net to set up anything we might want to do in the next 15 years. Because there's talk of Thrawn in there. There's talk of so much stuff. There's even an entire plot line around Vader's lightsaber being found that goes.
Yeah, we're still waiting on that to show up.
It's probably not going to.
No, it'll show up at some point. Like I said, Lucasfilm isn't as dumb as we all like to think they are. The problem is that they're just like, I like to. Okay, oh God, have any of you ever seen the movie Battleship with Liam Neeson and Taylor
Rihanna?
Yes, Rihanna. It's weird that she's the last person I think of.
You want me to call Ben real quick, Zach? He talks to me about that movie all the time.
But this is hold on a sec. This is the point I'm trying to make, because I think I told Rob this a couple of weeks ago. Yes, Liam Neeson's in that movie. The catalyst. There's a chicken burrito involved very early in the film. That's the catalyst for the events of the film. The point being, this is how I think of Lucasfilm.
Wait, what?
It'll be an episode of Cinemoddities at some point. If I'm ever.
I'm sorry. There's a lot of screeching to a halt moments in this
Well,
episode.
I know.
Just around
But this is the thing that I like to think of. Like I recently rewatched that movie because like there was an FYE sale. It was like on sale, so like I got it, and I forget what it was. I think it was John Justice, host of My Nerd World, author of the Embark Saga Empire. I think Empire is the correct word.
Yeah, I think you'd appreciate it being referred to as an empire.
Yes. He tweeted about it recently, and this is what I think of when it comes to Lucasfilm. There's a moment in that film where we have like the aliens, and they shoot off, I don't even know what you would call it, missiles, and one of the battleships, and I don't know my naval terminology, has like one of these like guns on the deck of the ship, and it's in this like alien, whatever you want to call it, ship is shooting off like dozens of like missiles, and this turret is trying to pick off as many of them as they can, and it can only physically do so much before one of them like lands onto the ship. And that's how I see Lucasfilm, is that Lucasfilm is just like is both the alien ship and the naval, like the US naval ship. Is that it's both firing so many things off and at the same time trying to pick off as many in this at the same time that it's inevitable that a couple of things just kind of fall through the cracks. And that's what I think of when I think of Lucasfilm. They're trying to do so much. It's impossible that they're able to catch everything that they lob up in the air. Maybe like a juggler, maybe is a better analogy for this. They're trying to juggle so many things that it's inevitable that some things will fall through the cracks, but eventually they will pick it up. And that's the thing too, is that like I as somebody who very early on in The Mandalorian, if we all forget like my opinions on that show a year and a half ago, I summarize that show as the adventures of not Boba Fett and his sidekick merchandising opportunity. Like, lest we forget that. And that's the thing. It's like for the same reason why we look at The Mandalorian as this grand success of the Star Wars franchise that is unparalleled. There has never been a greater thing in the Star Wars franchise except 5 years earlier when we had Rogue One. But we won't talk about that. Rogue One never existed. Darth Vader in the hallway here in Canto 4 means nothing. Nothing anymore. Shh, don't talk about that. Luke Skywalker, Dark Troopers. It comes down to the point of like The Mandalorian, like in that Atlantic article, it's the idea of the journey and not the destination. Have we forgotten Luke Skywalker at the end with the Dark Troopers? That's the only reason why that show has like Chris, you don't count. You and I are such super fans. We don't count anymore. Lucasfilm has like we are deep into their coffers at this point. They count on our money on a yearly basis.
Well, yeah, okay. You're probably going somewhere with this, but let me state categorically for the record, my favorite moment of Rogue One is not Darth Vader mauling a bunch of rebel soldiers because people are so dumb that it sickens me in the fandom. But it's literally the moment where Jyn is in Saw Gerrera's hideout and she gets this message from her father talking about how his life was wasted by being an Imperial slave and having to build this Death Star. And they're both,
Imperial slave? Don't you mean Imperial Boba Fett starship?
That's what I meant. Thank you for correcting me. I hope I'm not canceled. But my point is, like, moments like that are why Rogue One has a soul. Please continue.
I'm sorry for interrupting you, Chris. I had to make that. Much like Zenger, I had to make the joke over undercutting your point. I apologize.
Wait. So
I asked for it by using the S word.
Does that mean Anakin was just a Boba Fett ship in episode 1?
Boba Fett starship, yes.
Sorry, my bad.
You're not allowed to say the S word anymore in Star Wars.
I can't wait till it's just bleeped out in the name. The updated.
Oh my God!
Whatever.
You're not going to remember where you were, Zach, but I want to literally point out for the record that the original Kenner Slave 1 on the front of the box, literally, it doesn't say starship. It says Slave 1, and then under that in big bold letters, Boba Fett's spaceship.
Whoa.
Isn't that great?
That should be art. Like, I want that framed. Like, that should be like the Museum of Modern Art. Like, that should be like that. Like, someone should get like one of those OG Kenner boxes, and that should be there juxtaposed next to like the Lego version. Like,
I have it. I have it behind me, of course, as you all might assume, and it's a real important. It's a real
might assume.
It's a real important reminder that even back in 1980, when the biggest words on the box were Slave One, it was confusing to adults.
Do we know whose like brainchild that was to name that ship Slave One back in like 1978 or 79?
I'm embarrassed to say.
Is that a Joe Johnston decision? Is that something that would be revealed like in a J.W. Rinsler book? Like, do we know that as Star Wars fans whose idea it was to call it Slave One? Like who can we even ask that question to? Like, would it be Joe Johnston? Would it be J.W. Rinsler? Like, would it be Gary Kurtz? God bless his soul. No,
Would
Gary.
it be Steve in accounting?
It's Alan Ladd Jr. It was his idea. Okay, no, but the point. Thank you, Chris. Yes, you got me off topic, but the point being is that like I just feel the Star Wars fandom now is just like the equivalent of a child with like an infant with like dangling keys in front of it.
I swore you were about to say a gun.
A gun. If only. A gun where it shoots itself in the foot constantly.
I was just like, where are you going with this? Because I'm intrigued.
But this is the thing, though. Like, and this is where I kind of want to bring it to also like contemporary Star Wars news. And this is where I think Chris and I become, and Zenger too, more of a focal point of this. Not to forsake you, Joe. But like, let's take for example, like you have the idea of the diehard Star Wars fan. And I want to ask both Joe and Rob, because they're kind of tangentially connected to the podcast.
And hostages right now.
Yes, they're kind of like what Zenger was in 2017, unknowingly. There's never been a greater case of Stockholm Syndrome than there is with Zenger in the Knights of Vader podcast. Is that wrong, Zenger?
No, it's not. It's disturbingly factual.
All right, but like I want to ask Joe first. Would it be fair to say that Zenger, Chris, and I are hardcore Star Wars fans?
I can say unequivocally, yeah, you guys are hardcore
Okay.
Star Wars fans.
All right, Rob, are Chris, Zenger, and I hardcore Star Wars fans?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yes. Yeah. There's no reason to give an analogy. Yes.
Okay. And this is the thing that goes back to Disney, Lucasfilm thinking of the Star Wars fan base. I know Chris definitely saw this. I can't speak for Zenger, Joe, or Rob. You saw the Disney Hotel Starline Changillo Express theme park experience, right?
I need to shorten that title.
I don't even know how to Google that right now.
But Chris, you know what I'm talking about, right?
It's just a hotel at the theme park, yeah.
It's not just a hotel. No. It's not just a hotel. It's like a $3,000 a night experience.
Which is basically amounts from all I am able to gather online, basically amounts to something like 3 or 4 of the lightsaber experiences you can have in Galaxy's Edge combined with a hotel.
Yes, that is a super simplistic, cynical perspective on this. But to spend $3,000 a night, give or take, they haven't given exact price points yet, but the range is somewhere in the ballpark of like $2,000 to $3,000 a night.
They don't have the balls to.
Sure. The question is,
Prove me wrong.
But this is the thing, though. I have interest. But this is the thing, though, and this is where I want Chris to kind of explain, or I want him to reconcile all of these for me, because I don't think anyone but Chris can. If you're a Disney Lucasfilm, how do you, again, think about, you have your hardcore fans of Star Wars. How do you get those people on board if your understanding of the sequel trilogy is that it's an absolute disaster and the Disney Starliner Changillo Express hotel experience for $3,000 a night is exclusively steeped in the sequel trilogy? If you're a hardcore fan that believes that only the only good Star Wars is Star Wars and Empire, how do you expect anybody on the face of this earth to dole out $3,000 a night for this experience, other than YouTube influencers who are going to be competent?
I'm going to keep this really short, but I want to live in a world where there's an easy answer to that, and the answer would be that they won't do that. but it really just I don't know, I collect the sort of older Star Wars stuff, and it puts me in a crowd of people that are on average probably 20 years older than me in that community, and almost across the board they all think the sequel trilogy is terrible, but they've all been to Galaxy's Edge maybe more than once for a lot of them, and it's just literally a matter of they made a theme park about Star Wars, and it's well within my means to go to it, so I'm going to go to it. I'm not going to protest it. And I don't know, do I wish people voted with their dollars a little bit more? Perhaps, but for a lot of these people, and maybe the hotel's a little different than just going to Galaxy's Edge, but it's not people, it's a cultural phenomenon to go to Disneyland for a vacation. So these people are going there and spending money, because if you're going to go to Florida or California and hit the theme parks and you're a Star Wars fan, even if you hate the sequel trilogy, you're going to go to the Star Wars theme park. So they're catching these people anyways, because
that's okay, Chris, you summed it up beautifully. In how you phrased it. You might not be aware of it though, but essentially how I'm distilling this, and please tell me if I'm wrong, is that the rhetoric and the narrative means nothing at the end of the day. And that the fans are there regardless of what you produce. Whether it be The Rise of Skywalker, The Mandalorian, The Last Jedi, the fans will come out at the end. Like if you're inclined to like any of this, you're in it for $1 or you're in it for 10 grand. And that's the thing. It comes down to you're either in it a little bit or you're in it for all. That's the thing. If you hate the sequel trilogy, there's literally no reason for you to go to Galaxy's Edge. There's nothing there for you. There's nothing. There's nothing there that's based around the OT.
There is. It's calculated that you can walk up to a 1-to-1 Millennium Falcon, and you can't replicate that experience anywhere.
But that's TFA and Millennium Falcon.
It's not though. In what percentage would you say? 1%, 2, less than
the
5?
radar dish. If you're a
the radar
Wars,
dish.
But this is the thing.
You can't even probably see that from standing in front of it.
It doesn't matter though, because
it does matter, because it's 100% that design. And it's by design that they put it there so that those old people will go.
But that's the thing, though. But at the end of the day, if you're an OG Star Wars fan, that radar dish means everything. That radar dish tells you what era you're looking at, except for The Rise of Skywalker.
I don't agree.
I don't agree. Disagree. Yeah. I have to disagree, Zach.
I have to disagree too.
No. A Millennium Falcon is a Millennium Falcon is a Millennium Falcon. All right.
It's mostly an original trilogy Millennium Falcon.
All right, it doesn't matter about the radar dish.
But once you go on the ride though, it's Hondo Onaka. Who cares? I don't care about Hondo.
I know, but if Han was in the picture, would you really be getting behind the wheel in any?
Yes.
The scenario?
To this day, I do not understand how you make a Millennium Falcon ride and do not have Han Solo there.
Because what version of Han Solo do you have?
It doesn't matter. It's Harrison. You can call it the Harrison Ford experience.
Detours. That's the correct answer.
Could you imagine? Listen. There's nothing more cringy than the video. Look at even when you have an actor who's not 70 and interested in doing their job. They refashioned the Jurassic World ride, Jurassic Park ride. It's basically the same ride. They added some screens and stuff, and now they have Chris Pratt yelling at you on monitors. It's some of the most cringy stuff you could ever find out there. A Harrison Ford equivalent to that is nothing I ever want to see. I feel like the point of that is almost more to me, it's almost more being able to visit an active set of a Star Wars movie. That's the appeal of Galaxy's Edge. I have no, they assure it has a theoretical placement in the canonical timeline, but that's just less relevant to me. It's random planet with the Falcon.
But I think you've proven my point though, is that the movie, any contemporary Star Wars, and at this point, that could literally be any date. That could be any date. It could be 1980 forward, 1983 forward, pretty much anything post 1977. Is that it doesn't matter what Lucasfilm does as long as it has the word Star Wars on it, nobody cares. If all it matters is that it's the Millennium Falcon, then the same, and considering that the words Millennium Falcon and the iconography of that ship are synonymous with the words Star Wars, it means literally nothing Disney does matters.
I totally get what you're saying. I totally get what you're saying, and I understand that from a fiscally responsible perspective, that makes sense. But what kind of world is it where these same old dudes who are bringing their families to Galaxy's Edge, paying for all their like grown kids to go hang out in Florida with them for a weekend at the Star Wars theme park, and yet they're doing that, yet at the same time they have nothing but scorn and creative disregard for the films Disney is putting out. It's not the ideals. All I'm trying to say is they're financially viable. It's just it's just not the ideal universe for this product. There's a world in which they could make a film that is creatively satisfying to the actual fans.
I think, but again, I don't disagree with you. Like, you're clearly right, because reality speaks for itself. Galaxy's Edge is proving to be as much a success as anybody could ever want to be. It's maybe not as successful as what Hogsmeade was for Universal back in 2010, because that to this day is still like one of the most inexplicable things to ever exist in like theme park lore. But that's a conversation for another day. It comes down to is that like Galaxy's Edge is another example of like letting the numbers speak for themselves. It goes to show that like no matter how much you hate the sequel trilogy, you are going to go there because it is Star Wars Mecca. And I don't mean for that to be blasphemous.
My true version of the Millennium Falcon is the one at the end of Return of the Jedi where there is no radar dish because it got broken off by Lando. So if I don't have that one when I go to Galaxy's Edge, I will rip the thing off myself.
Fun fact, the idea that the Millennium Falcon had to get a new radar dish is the most canonical connection the sequel trilogy has to Return of the Jedi.
I get, sure, I'm not even going to argue that.
That's more offensive than Zach's giving it credit, but that's fine.
Sure. No, I'm not even going to argue with that. Like I wouldn't even know where to begin. Like, I want to make another joke based off Zenger's. My only canonical version of the Millennium Falcon is the triangular radar dish that they had for it in the early Mattel toy leaks for the Rise of Skywalker in like 2018.
Perfect.
Deep cut.
Perfect.
I think my ideal Millennium Falcon is they make it enormous and out of Legos, so Chris, we the people can act as the wrong scale figures.
The wrong scale ones? Okay, perfect. Yes, awesome.
Here's how. Okay, I'm glad you brought that up again, because here's how. Like these people need to really shut up about the scale of that Republic gunship.
Oh God,
did you know? Did you know that?
Really? Oh God, damn it, Rob! Why did you have to do this?
Did you all know that when they filmed The Empire Strikes Back, the giant Millennium Falcon that was built out by men out of wood and nails that existed in Echo Base while they were filming The Empire Strikes Back was actually 75% scale. And if you actually watch the shot where Han's working on it and Chewie's in the cockpit, Chewie looks ridiculously big because even that is not a full scale 1-to-1 Millennium Falcon that they built that is filmed in The Empire Strikes Back.
Is there such a thing as a 1-to-1 scale Millennium Falcon? Do we even know what that is?
Yes, it's at Galaxy's Edge.
No, it's not. My true Millennium Falcon is the one from the Solo movie. The one after they do the Kessel Run, where it's all destroyed.
I'm just saying they knowingly made it 70% for filming The Empire Strikes Back. So never talk to me again about your Legos being out of scale. That's all I'm saying.
Oh my. Okay, I want Rob. Okay, Rob, considering he's the one that's the furthest outside of the fandom. Rob, based on everything that I said and Chris said, what is your take on this? I just want your take on it as someone who's the residential filthy casual.
Also, what is your true Millennium Falcon? Like, which one do you want to go see? Okay, perfect.
I want a small Lego one that a kid can accidentally fall on and break.
So just a regular Lego one.
Yeah, that's fine. No, so you're looking for my opinion on the theme park stuff?
I want your opinion on the fact that, like, if you have, like Chris phrased it, men in their 50s and 60s who are going to Galaxy's Edge, regardless of the fact that it is a physical locale of everything they hate about Star Wars, and yet they're still going there spending thousands of dollars on it and have no problem spending thousands of dollars, are they hypocrites? And that is my thesis of, if that's the case, if these fans who are diehards going to Galaxy's Edge, even though it's a physical representation of everything they hate about Star Wars post 2012, is it hypocritical in that it boils down to, it doesn't matter what Disney does, for better or for worse, whether it be Mandalorian or Last Jedi, as long as it has the Star Wars logo, it doesn't matter at the end of the day.
Sure. Well, I definitely don't think those people are hypocritical, and I want to explain why. But I do agree that it does not matter what Disney does. And the reason I think that, as long as it has Star Wars, I mean, the reason I think that is because the people who, grew up on the original trilogy, even I think people in, my generation who grew up more on the prequels, or at least they came out when they were alive and watched the original trilogy as kids. Even the Atlantic article gets touches on it, where Star Wars is this universe you can live in. It gives you this feeling of Sonder, that no matter where you look, that character or that thing has such a deep story behind it. It feels like a universe you live in, and I think that's what a lot of this boils down to. That these fans really, really love their original Star Wars because it gave them that feeling of being able to live in that universe. And when they get new Star Wars that doesn't exactly fit their image of the universe, or they don't think they can walk right into it, they get a little angry. But I have no problem, they might not say it explicitly, but somewhere deep down, even if they hate, like you said, this new trilogy and this theme park is the embodiment and physical representation of that new trilogy, the positive feeling of nostalgia and physically stepping into that world, which is something they've wanted to do since being a child, will always win out over those negative feelings. And that's why I don't think they're hypocritical, because I think everybody should strive to be happier than they are angrier. But at the same time, that's what Disney's banking on. They're banking on that feeling of nostalgia and that feeling of living in the Star Wars universe will never, ever go away. So I'm kind of with both of you in some weird kind of sense that, it might not matter. It makes me think that, like I think back, what was that? The Marvel, the Mandarin, where, the Mandarin's like the fake in Iron Man 3, and you have people still buying the action figures going, well, I'm just going to pretend he's the real Mandarin. Like they'll fit whatever narrative they want to with these physical representations to feel better about themselves and better about their experience. So I think there's some level of, Star Wars as a whole is going to win out over Star Wars as a specific point in time.
He is describing a generally accurate view of the general populace, which I despise and can't disagree with more. But like, he's accurately representing how things will play out in the real world. And like, if it makes money, they're going to keep doing the same thing. It's just that, like, I just have to believe a potential universe exists where the content isn't this contentious and is a little bit more thoughtfully created, because it's not healthy to have directors putting out sound bites out there that are like, yeah, maybe it would have been good if we had a plan. Like, that's just, you don't need to be in that universe of silliness. That's all. Like, that's a recent quote we had to deal with. JJ being like, a plan might have been good.
But that is a topic for a whole other discussion. But at this point, I objectively cannot rely on anything JJ says, because he's bitter. He is somebody who did not want to direct episode 9, who was begrudgingly dragged into it as a personal favor after they fired the madman, and then he had the film basically taken out of his hands.
Right,
so
but when you're saying firing the madman, like his core argument of the core thesis of his comment that a plan would have been good, whether it's his plan or Lucasfilm's plan, is correct either way.
I don't know about that. Again, when JJ makes those as somebody who's never trusted JJ Abrams, I don't trust a single thing he says.
I don't trust anything he says either, but like the fact that he's saying it, but the fact that he's making that public comment means that there's dissension amongst the ranks. It means that they didn't have a good experience working together. It's just, there's something wrong with the way they're running the show, creatively speaking.
Right. But if that's the case, then it applies across the board, because it's the same management that gave us The Mandalorian. Think about it. The Mandalorian and The Rise of Skywalker were both being made at the exact same time. So for the same reason why we can attack Lucasfilm for saying, oh, there was no plan for the sequel trilogy, we have to also say that they're running The Mandalorian the exact same way. Like the same could be said.
I agree. I think it's more
Actually,
a
I
matter of
disagree.
I think it's more a matter of a roll of the dice that The Mandalorian turned out better than the sequel trilogy. It's just that, like, can they identify what was different about that scenario and learn from it? I don't know.
Joe, elaborate.
I disagree, because if you sit there and you look at what's going on across the pond at Marvel, they had one person who calls the shots. He's the one that decides what does and has uniformity about all of their movies that are coming out. So one does this is going to follow into that, that's going to follow into that. You sit there and you look at Star Wars, there was nothing like that. There's nothing that exists like that. You know, they brought in Jon Favreau, he's the showrunner. He's the one that makes the decision. This is how it's going to pan out. He reports to Kathleen Kennedy. You know, Kathleen Kennedy was supposed to be the Kevin Feige of Star Wars, and that just didn't pan out. And that's where you're going to see the big issue right there, because how come they can work it out with interconnected movies for 10 years and they can't even figure out Star Wars? It's leadership.
Not only that, but Kevin Feige is a bigger Star Wars nerd than Kathleen Kennedy times a million. I'm not an MCU defender. I think the MCU is creatively bankrupt as well, but and of course, the box office numbers say otherwise, so it must be high art. But you know, I think it's emblematic of everything that's wrong with our culture. It's just I could fall asleep during half those movies. Don't get me wrong, but Feige has a better handle on the style of storytelling and the eccentricities of the universe than Kathleen Kennedy does about Star Wars. So these things it's not surprising these things play out the way they do. I just think there could be a more healthy relationship between Lucasfilm and the directors they hire, where they understand the vision rather than just put trust behind a name.
And that
Rian
goes,
Johnson.
That goes to the studio head, and that goes to her, where she should have that in hand. She should be able to know what's going on. She should be able to course correct before bad press goes out.
Feige would never say there's no source material for the expanded universe of Star Wars. You know what I mean? Feige knows about 90s Star Wars books, and he's doing that job for Marvel. You know, it's a weird world.
And he could sit there and he could cherry pick whatever he wants from many of the Marvel books, and he has carte blanche to do it. And she has carte blanche to do it with the expanded universe too. She's the only reason why that those aren't canon anymore.
You got to know what it is to pull. You got to know what it is to
exactly
to pick out to cherry pick it. You have to know what it is. It's pretty. I mean, it's straightforward to me. It's just she's a producer and an executive producer who does a great job at that. But we shouldn't expect her to have a handle on the eccentricities of the Star Wars universe, knowing her resume. And I think that's where this gets really weird, because it's she obviously does the critical elements of her job role when it comes to feature film production and fantastically. It's just that we just a lot of us were just expecting more reliance on the pre-existing narrative for that story. I think that's really what it comes down to. For me, and a lot of the people I talk to, it's just there wasn't enough intention and weight and the desire to continue the previously established story. Like you were saying earlier, Zach, it's because the attitude was that the prequels were bad in 2012. Maybe that's the biggest problem with all of this. I don't know.
But at the same time, though, clearly they've learned from that, because look at how much they've cherry picked. Think about Thrawn's being lined up as the next big bad of Star Wars. Whether it be the Ahsoka show, the Book of Boba Fett, Mandalorian season 3, he's clearly being primed as that. And guess what? That is the Thrawn trilogy, the OG Thrawn trilogy. That is that. So
yeah, but at the same time, when we say Thrawn is being set up as this, we're talking about a Thrawn that is not the character that you and I think of when we think of Thrawn.
But okay, you're both right and wrong, because you're right in one degree, because when we think of Thrawn, we think of the character from 3 books in the early 90s who had maybe 20% of the focal point of those 3 books, because everybody forgets the majority of those books is very much around other characters. Not, even though we call them the Thrawn books, he is the antagonist. He is not a protagonist of those books. And then, so, and you're also right in the other regard as well, in that, like, if you look at Thrawn on Rebels versus his novels, he is written very differently.
Yeah.
But at the same, thank you, Zenger. And yet at the same time too, I think you're wrong in the regard is that, like, Thrawn, at the same day, is Thrawn, as long as Thrawn is a master technician who has blue skin and red eyes,
It says perhaps every now and then.
Exactly. Once again, thank you, Zenger. It's the idea of, like, who, it's coming down to just, it's that Galaxy's Edge argument you gave me. Doesn't matter what incarnation of Thrawn we get as long as we get Thrawn. Like, that's what Star Wars boils down to.
You're asking the difference of one.
Yeah, but it's like,
I want the novel one.
What percentage of the audience knows the difference, I guess, is what you're asking. And, like, I'm happily placed among the percentage that knows the difference. And I'm sorry for everyone who doesn't.
Well, sure, and I agree with you though. But at the same time, though, it's like, as somebody who read the OG Thrawn trilogy, he's a fun character because he's different. It's nice to see a Star Wars antagonist that isn't just simply evil space wizard. He's someone more based in our reality than the normal Star Wars reality, and it's fun to see those sort of just, like, ideals, like, butt heads, and that's what makes Thrawn a compelling character and what's made him kind of endure. But at the same time, though, is that, like, as somebody who was a child for the majority of, almost the entirety of the prequel trilogy era, did anybody really care about Grand Admiral Thrawn from 1999 to 2005? Meaningfully?
I did.
Yeah,
Did you?
I mean, I'm gonna say I did too, and because you know how I so badly wanted them to reference those books that, like, even when, like, let me tell you, like, there, you know, even when stupid moments happen, like in the wonderful 2001 game, Jedi Knight, Jedi Outcast, on when you go to Nar Shaddaa and the bar open, you walk into the bar and the bartender is a chiss. I was like, oh my god, it's a chiss. It's just like Grand Admiral Thrawn. I was so starved for that content in those early 2000s years that I was like wanting there to be more to that story. But you know that, but a bartender chiss in a 2001 video game is more of a nod to the expanded universe than we got in the entire sequel trilogy, bear in mind. So it's just rude. Neil Scanlan's the worst thing that ever happened to Star Wars next to J.J. Abrams. And, you know, these aliens, it's just like, you know, they're purposefully distancing themselves from the best stuff that ever happened. And, you know, it's off-putting to a large segment of the fan base, and it doesn't need to be that way. That's all I'm saying. It's not, it's the numbers are never going to tell them that it doesn't need to be that way, but, like, culturally, it doesn't need to be this ridiculous and debated and terrible, and I hate to use the word, but toxic. Like, it doesn't have to be like this. That's all I'm trying to say.
Fair enough. All right. There's just one final thing. Like, we talked a lot about this when it comes to just, like, qualitative versus quantitative arguments as to how Star Wars is deemed successful in an era where we really don't have concrete numbers to point at. So I have a qualitative argument to make, and once again, I'm gonna kind of, like, lean on Rob when it comes to my judgment of this, and Chris to a kind of the same degree, but a little bit less. Considering that, like, we do not know the numbers of, like, streaming numbers when it comes to The Mandalorian, and even if we did have numbers, we don't know what that number is. As, like, oh, if it gets X amount of viewers, it's in the black or the red. Again, raw data can only tell us so much, and we don't even have that. But this is one of those qualitative arguments that I think is absolutely fascinating. And we talked about this, I think, I forget when, maybe it was definitely last year, maybe as early as maybe, like, The Mandalorian season 1. And this is my favorite argument to show you that The Mandalorian is not as successful as it is pop culture and the internet likes to think it is. And this is my point. If The Mandalorian was truly successful, you would have seen Din Djarin and Grogu, aka Big Whiskey, at Galaxy's Edge. And The Mandalorian has been out now for almost 2 years, And guess what? There's not been a single Din Djarin walk around character or Baby Yoda, Big Whiskey meet and greet. And you know how easy it would be for them to sit there do something like that? You know how easy it would be into any of those theme parks, even if it wasn't in Galaxy's Edge? Like, even like Hollywood Studios.
You're right that it'd be easy. They just don't want to be viewed as reactionary in that way.
It's almost 2 years later. There's no such thing as reactionary 2 years later. And all it would think about, they have all those costume pieces for Din Djarin. They could 3D print those is Joe Yazzo, as someone who's 3D prints things. How long would it take a multi-billion-dollar multinational company like the Walt Disney Company to 3D print a Din Djarin costume that was screen accurate?
Screen accurate, you're probably looking at, let's say, if anything, paint and everything, you're looking at about a week. That's it.
Exactly. If this show was as truly culturally relevant and milestone for the world, you would have had that walk around character not even within, I'd say, a month of the season 1 ending. Not even. And the fact that they haven't done that yet leads me to believe this show is nowhere near as successful on a quantitative level as we're led to believe. And this is where I want Rob, because I know Chris probably has an answer to this, but I want him to kind of gestate on it for a moment. Rob, once I say this, does that argument make sense to you as a relative normie?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, something that was said earlier in this conversation made me think, I think you guys were mentioning something about deleting the sequel trilogy or what parts are going to get deleted. That's one of the things that I thought is, well, they could easily just, as you were saying, at Galaxy's Edge, it's such a physical manifestation of the sequel trilogy. Well, rip some of that out and just put in some stuff for The Mandalorian if that's so successful. Chris makes an interesting point, though, about reactionary and about the timeline of these things, which I know what you're saying, Zach, that it has been a lot of time. But yeah, that's a tough one. It's a kind of something that makes me think of, I'm with you. Why haven't they done that yet?
And the fact that
the
I don't care.
pandemic is why.
That's fine. That's okay. Then why didn't they announce it in January 2020? The pandemic was not here yet. The show premiered in November of 2019. They could have had, like you said, Joe, they could have had a 3D printed costume done, and they could have had that character walking around at any point in November of 2019.
Which comes to the same thing that we're talking about. It's a failure of leadership.
But no. But this, okay, I don't disagree with you in concept, but then this goes down to, think about it. Theme park walk around characters are not Kathleen Kennedy's prerogative. She has zero control over that.
She does. She could say, no, you can't use that.
No, she can't. No, she can't. That's a Parks and Resorts decision, not a Lucasfilm decision.
That's a Lucasfilm decision.
No, it's not. No. This is where I disagree with you. Remember, Disney is very compartmentalized for a reason. That would be an argument between Parks and Resorts and the studio, and that's above her. That's above her pay grade. It is. That's the thing. Guess what? That is a executive suite decision that's above her pay grade. You have to trust me on that, Joe, and the audience. If Disney Parks and Resorts want a walk around character of Din Djarin and Grogu, it would be, they could make the decision instantaneously. And if you doubt me about that, go look at the integration of Frozen into the theme parks post November 2013.
All right, I'm gonna go look. I'll be back in a little bit.
When did Galaxy's Edge open? Maybe to better get at what I'm asking is, how was Episode 8 out by the time that Galaxy's Edge opened, or was that between Episode 7 and Episode 8?
No, Episode 8 was out for a year. Episode 8 was out by the time Galaxy's Edge was opened.
Okay, so then that brings me to the thought of, the sequel trilogy. Of course, the backlash that Episode 8 gets, the controversy that Episode 8 gets, compared to the success or the word of mouth success that The Mandalorian is getting. Maybe they didn't want to mix something that was so well received with something that was clearly starting to falter. Because if Galaxy's Edge, the theme park, is all sequel trilogy, if that's starting to falter, I get what you're saying, Zach. Maybe they can beef it up and say, no, still come to our theme parks. Here's this stuff. By not putting it in there, Baby Yoda, Big Whiskey, not putting him in there, if they keep fleshing out this Jon Favreau Disney Plus show things, and that gets really popular, maybe just make that its own separate attraction.
That's fine. I don't argue with that. My thing is that it takes absolutely no effort to carve out a little corner and just have the Mandalorian Baby Yoda meet and greet.
No, definitely.
Well,
you're not wrong,
they,
yeah.
I mean, they kind of did. They sort of did. I mean,
Okay.
like, yeah, for like, you know, for people who are really hard following Galaxy's Edge out there, which there might be one of you in the audience, you're screaming right now, Zach, but what about the child augmented reality photo op thing that they put in Galaxy's Edge? But that's in Galaxy. It's in Galaxy's Edge, though.
It doesn't count. It doesn't count. You know how easy it would be? Okay, if you want to believe any of this, I'll even take it back one step further than a meet and greet. I will take Rob's point, and I'll be like, okay, they don't want to mix the good and the bad. I will accept that. You know how many parades there are? You know how many? No, I don't know about that. If you want to take it one step further and not want to tarnish the good with the bad, then guess what? Why not put a Dinjar in one of the parades at Hollywood Studios or Disneyland? You know how easy every single one of these Disney parades, there is some equivalent of a stormtrooper or some level of Disney iconography. Darth Vader, Boba Fett, whatever. How hard would it be? Even if you don't want to sit there, put a Mandalorian meet and greet into Galaxy's Edge. Have the Dinjarin character as in the armor iconography walk in the parade.
I know this is like probably too open-ended of a question for like nearly the third hour, but like, do you think that do you think there's maybe a conception that, like, although I know these are both sort of like the sequel trilogy and the Mandalorian are like approximately designed for the same age audience, like they don't feel like it, and it's really more a matter of cutting around things that would necessitate a harsher rating than it is the actual narrative of the stories. You know what I mean? I feel like the sequel trilogy is geared at a younger audience than even Rogue One is, like, narratively, and maybe I
agree with you on the sequel trilogy relative to Rogue One. When it comes to the Mandalorian, no, I think the Mandalorian has been watered down for an even younger audience than the sequel trilogy is intended for.
All right, well, I was just completely destroyed, so I can say.
No, Chris, you know I love you. Like I said, folks, the proof is in the pudding. I don't care how much that we kind of argue about these things in a rhetorical sense. The fact that you do not have a Mandalorian walk around character in any of the parks, I don't care where it might be, whether it be in the corner, like off to like the fringes, or it's in the middle of Galaxy's Edge watching Din Djarin do a little jig underneath the giant 1-to-1 Millennium Falcon from The Force Awakens. It's the idea that if this show was truly that popular, go back to Frozen in 2013 with Elsa and Anna. You know how fast those characters is, like, they hired an actress that looked just like Elsa and Anna and they plugged them into the theme parks within no time. And considering that you don't even need a fraction of that for the Mandalorian, all you need is someone with a similar build to Pedro Pascal to wear that armor, and they haven't done that yet at any of the theme parks almost 2 years in, leads me to believe that show is not doing the same numbers, or it's not doing the numbers they expected it to be.
You just said it right there. Show, not movie. Show.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The Mandalorian is considered the second coming of Space Jesus.
But still, it's a show. It's a streaming show.
But that's the thing, though. Disney is solely. Think about it.
You're missing a huge thing.
Hold on a second, Zinger. Hold on a second. Hold your joke for 2 seconds.
No, I've actually got a statement, not a joke.
Okay. Then excuse me, Zinger. Proceed.
No, I was gonna say you're missing the biggest thing. Isn't, as I said way earlier in the episode, isn't Ahsoka now leading the Mandoverse going forward?
I don't know if it's Mandoverse. It's the Star Wars Disney Plus verse. I don't know. I really don't know. Ahsoka was in one episode of that show, so.
But they've hinted that she's going to be the driving force of the show, and Din's going to kind of step to the side, since his story's sort of told at the moment.
I don't know if that's the case. Mandalorian season 3 is coming right after the Book of Boba Fett. Ahsoka is, God, the Ahsoka series is coming after Mandalorian season 3, Calrissian Endor, and Book of Boba Fett. So if that is the case, evidence the physical evidence of the timetable proves otherwise. But
Yeah,
I could
but
be wrong.
even that rumor going around though, I think should be taken into account, because if that rumor going around points to like they're trying to get this hype around her and move it away from him, which that could point to your whole thing on, well, I mean, if it isn't popular, why are they moving away from him then?
Zenger, I appreciate the assist, but I don't know. Genuinely, objectively, I do not know. That's the
Okay.
thing too that's frustrating about Disney is whereas with Marvel and for better or for worse, there is and this kind of goes back to Chris's argument of there's a plan. We know the trajectory of the Marvel Cinematic Universe for the next couple months, and the pandemic kind of showed it. Even though things kind of got delayed for a year, everything kind of just got rolled back a few months.
Yeah, because the
Right.
second Black Widow was out, they started showing stuff for Archery Boy, Green
Hawkeye.
Arrow.
Hawkeye.
I was correct with my statement, but no, they're showing stuff for him now because he's
I love
integral
you,
to
Zenger.
the.
I love you.
Thanks for proving my point. Like, there's nothing less interesting than the MCU, but that's fine.
And spoilers for the post-credits scene of Black Widow.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even a spoiler. It's just you see a picture of Hawkeye. Congrats, you've seen a picture of Jeremy Renner with the terrible haircut.
You mean there's a different superhero character at the end credit sequence of a Marvel MCU film that is not the main protagonist of the film you're currently watching?
She dead.
Oh,
That's the other thing. Can we go into this, or you want to shy away from it?
Go for it. It doesn't care. Go for it, Joe. We're 2.5 hours. Go for it.
At this point, there's no turning back.
Who actually got her body?
Wait, do they need to get her body to bury? I don't think they need a body to bury, do they?
I don't know if they would.
They just melted down a bunch of like plastic action figures and put it in the casket.
Perfect.
The ones that they didn't release for Avengers. That's what they did.
Fun fact, folks, they didn't release the Black Widow figures for Endgame. Boycott Marvel. Hashtag misogyny. Hashtag
Not my Star Wars.
Hashtag not my Star Wars. Hashtag not my Black Widow. Hashtag not my MCU. Hashtag not my Kang the Conqueror. Insert any others at your discretion.
Hashtag I don't even know who you are.
But go ahead, Joe. Continue.
No, I was just thinking it was like they had this whole elaborate thing at the end, and that was it.
Want to introduce a character that we've already been introduced to in a TV show?
Well, no, it's not that, but I don't want to ruin it for anyone who hasn't watched
What,
it.
the fact that Kramer shows up?
No.
I mean, did I just pitch a better movie?
Yes, you did.
Okay, cool.
That's the multiverse.
Congratulations.
multiverse.
Zenger is now the studio head for Marvel.
Hey, I did it.
Hooray! You'll get your t-shirt in the mail.
I like to imagine like the equivalent of that is like the ending of The Mandalorian season 2 where Zenger just walks in, he sits on a giant throne. he shoots a fat Bib Fortuna. He's just like, I am in charge now.
Isn't that like it's so beautiful how like overhyped that ending is? It's like he killed like 3 people who were like so out of shape they couldn't defend themselves, and he sits in a throne.
To be fair, he's also kind of out of shape, so like I guess it's kind of balanced.
No,
but
they
it's
were
just
all shape.
It's like Dad Bob.
He
Boba Fett.
he kills Gamorrean guards who don't even look like Gamorrean guards, and then like he literally just shoots a man who's sitting in a chair defenseless, and he sits on a throne. Like,
But
this
you forgot.
is
Whoa, Chris, you
Whoa,
forgot. He's got Mulan strafing him.
yeah.
Whoa. Rewind real quick. Hold up. Are you saying people in chairs are defenseless? Because I think Charles Xavier had something to say about that.
I mean, Bib Fortuna was armed with a stick at the time. You're right.
You gotta be careful with those people with the sticks, man. They can be dangerous.
Yeah.
They're seated.
Remember Chirrut Imwe from Rogue One, the greatest Star Wars film we never talk about anymore.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to. For
I'm one with the
reasons.
Force is with me.
And he was
Remember
blind.
that? And he was blind too, and he could use a stick. Bib Fortuna wasn't even blind.
Yeah, but just generally, could we have our main character end up ripping off the ending of the Chronicles of Riddick? No, it has to be Boba Fett. Who did
God, it is just the Chronicles of Riddick.
I don't know. It's just why does everyone love that? 5 companies are making statues of this Boba Fett throne. It's my God, what is the matter with human beings? But I say that as a Star Wars collector, that is a boring scene. Stop.
You're right. Okay, Chris, I have to ask. And this is kind of for everybody who's seen The Mandalorian. What is the best Boba Fett scene from The Mandalorian season 2? And I kind of want to go around the room. Chris, what is your favorite Boba Fett scene from The Mandalorian?
Basically, everything where he's
you can't say everything.
No. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. I'm giving parameters. All the parts where he is actually flying the Slave One in the same episode wherein he drops the seismic charge.
Okay, Zenger, what is your favorite Boba Fett moment from Mandalorian season 2?
I want to say that was a terrible pick for you. I'll show you how this is properly done. Of course, where he first puts on the armor, but the best line by him is, "I think they'll recognize my face."
All right, Rob, what is your
That's
favorite?
how you do it. That's how you do it right there.
I'm
Take
not going
notes,
to give a good answer, Zach. You have to
I
go
don't
Joe
care.
first.
Okay, Joe, what is your favorite Boba Fett moment from Mandalorian season 2?
I liked the fact where he sat there and he pulled out the armor. He's like, "See, it belongs to me. It was my father's."
I'd like
Interesting.
to restate my answer.
See, I told you did it wrong.
I'd like to amend it to the part where he's badly playing acoustic guitar in the behind the scenes footage.
No, you're a jerk. You know what? You lose your vote from earlier. All right, Rob.
So
what is
Zinger wins.
Rob, wait, no, Rob hasn't gone yet. Rob, what is your
my favorite is the post credit scene because it meant the show was over because I really did not enjoy watching it.
God damn it, Rob! I hate you so
knew
much.
that. I don't remember any
Up,
scene.
that does. Oh, anger edits.
I mean,
What
the true edgelord answer is when he shows his chain code to Din, acknowledging that the prequels actually happened.
Okay.
Well, the other thing too is it doesn't matter if it was actually Boba Fett. If it was any clone, they could sit there and say that.
That's fair. That is fair.
Which my theory, Hunter, is the actual Boba Fett in The Mandalorian.
Okay, I wasn't expecting any of this, so you guys kind of defeated my point prematurely. But I thought my opinion on the best moment from Boba Fett is when he shoots down we see him aiming at the one ship with the rangefinder, and the missile goes off course and hits the other one and crashes into the other one. And Din Djarin's nice shot. He's like, "What do you mean? I missed." And I think that just goes to whereas I to this day, I'm kind of I'm so morbidly excited about the book of Boba Fett because I think I've gone on record numerous times saying that the only reason why The Mandalorian exists is because Disney realized we can't make a Boba Fett movie because there's no good way to do this without ruining the character. And yet now 3 years later, we're yup, we're just gonna do it. We're gonna ruin this character once and for all because nothing matters. Like Rob says, nothing matters. And yet somehow we're here. I don't know. Like I said, I kind of and I guess this might be the final question to kind of punctuate this conversation with. What
I love
is
how final question is said. Anyways, everyone take note of
Can I please
where
finish?
how much is left in the episode on your podcast catcher thing.
Okay, no, but this is the final questions, and eventually, I hope for the intent of just ending this conversation. What is the trajectory of Star Wars going forward? And I kind of want everyone to be kind of is abridged with this comment as much as you can. I don't expect a lengthy conversation or a lengthy reason. What do you expect from Star Wars in the next 2 years? I guess that's the question. Or maybe 3. You know what? I'll give it an extra year, 3 years, because I think Rogue Squadron's 2023, if I remember correctly. what do you expect, or what do you even want from Star Wars in the next couple of years?
I don't know what to expect just because of my lack of knowledge compared to you guys. But what I want, I think, goes back to what I said at the start and what Chris was hinting at. I don't really want them to kill the Force, smash the Force. I would like them to do something to change the dynamic of the Force. Something interesting with this thing we've been stuck with for, 50 years now. Almost 50 years.
All right. Mr. Yazzo.
Well, I think they're going to go into a multiverse approach where they're going to sit there and maybe do some what ifs and then bring back some of the expanded universe. Also, you're going to see in toy stores, they're going to start loading them up with more merchandising because that's one of the failed opportunities they have. They're going to go back to Lucas era merchandising.
Oh, he's
where
being
they're going to have
serious.
they're going to have characters for everybody. Doesn't matter how long they've been on the TV screen or on the big screen.
Joe,
I hope.
I like
I
that.
hope.
We need more portals.
Okay, I hope at least part of what Joe said was right, because you know how much it kills me that I walk every single day as somebody who works near a Target, and I walk, and a Walmart. I literally every chance I go to either one, I walk immediately. Even my girlfriend knows this. No matter what we're going there for, the first rule of thumb is always beeline for the Star Wars section. And you know how many times I've been disappointed? You know how many times I just want to walk it every time, except for that one time I found a elite squad clone trooper, and I got a little excited. With that being said, just real quick, merchandise wise, I was able to get 2 Captain Fordos and 2 blue ARC troopers. So I have no idea if Walmart will cancel those pre-orders on me come March 2022. I'm excited, and I also got 2 of the Crosshair Imperial costume Black Series. But anyway, though, go
On
ahead.
that note, though, Zach, I used to be an assistant manager for KB Toys in 1999, and we had the midnight release for episode 1, and we had half the store with toys, action figures, accessories, everything that you wanted for that movie was out. And there has been nothing like that. Well, probably because there's no toy stores left in America anymore. Well, you have to rely on Target and you have to rely on Walmart. But I don't know if there's no outlets or what, but there has been hardly any merchandising for Star Wars. Because I go into Target and I went into Walmart, and it's like half the aisle is empty with merchandise. And I would never see that when I was working at a toy store.
At some point, Joe, can we please have a conversation where it's you, Chris, and we just talk about confessions of a KB toy manager?
Sure.
I made a lot of money with GameStop for me.
I made a lot of money one time. No. Some guy came up to me, and it was when they were releasing the old Power of the Force, and the guy's like, "Hey, can you let me know when you get AT-ATs in?" And I made $100 off the guy because I queued him in when we were getting a shipment of in.
Joyous. I have many questions.
Oh boy. Okay, who else has an answer to this question? It's late and I'm delirious.
I got an answer. What was the question?
Where do you see Star Wars in 2-3 years from now? How many tickets have you pre-ordered for Patty Jenkins' Rogue Squadron is my question for you, Zenger.
Okay, so my thing is this. I'm gonna run everyone through something. Much like Dogecoin, Star Wars had a peak back around, and actually this is ironic, May the 4th. Dogecoin had a peak of 65 cents. It dropped down on May the 5th to 58 cents. Rised up to 68 cents, and now it's at 21 cents. There's only one way Star Wars can go, and that's up, right? Just like Dogecoin. Everyone's still got their Doge, right? Everyone's still doing Doge.
Hold.
Okay.
Hold.
I'm still holding it. I'm pretty sure I lost a substantial amount of money back in May, but I'm holding. Only go up, right? Much like Star Wars.
Funny story about that. I actually invested in Doge at 0.0025, and people thought I was absolutely nuts.
0.0025.
Yeah, a quarter of a penny.
Oh, that must have been back in 2021, early 2021.
In the distant past of early 2021.
2019.
Whoa.
Whoa. I don't even have it on the... Oh, wait. Now I see where it is on the scale. Okay, I had to go back. I had to go back in time. Oh, there was a peak back in 2017 there for a minute.
Okay, this is not relevant to the conversation. Okay, who else hasn't answered this question yet? Rob, have you answered this question?
Yeah, I wanted the kill the Force or do something interesting with the dynamic.
Okay, so
You're wrong.
So Rob, how many tickets have you pre-ordered to Patty Jenkins's Rogue Squadron?
Oh God, 0.
The correct answer is not enough.
They're a number less than 0.
Rob's like, I am taking people's tickets who have already pre-ordered and returning it for them. Rob's like, no, I'm doing you a service. This is an intervention.
I think it's just Chris as the one we haven't heard from.
Chris, what do you? Oh God, Chris's answers give you like 3 hours long. Chris, what do you expect from Star Wars in the next couple of years? You'll resist.
I'll resist. Yeah, I think the important thing that the one we don't have the data on Mandalorian, but it's as much as I hate to admit it, it's one of those things where it's out there in the sort of fan community. It's no one passionately hates it, and that's a step forward for these guys. So they're just like, wow, no one's passionately hating it. Some people are ho-hum about it. No one thinks it's the worst thing we've ever done. This is improvement. So I feel like the structure of those next few series are going to be very sort of similar to that, where nothing sort of super substantial narratively happens, and it's just a lot of sort of we're caught up in the ins and outs of some random character's experience, and it's not anything sort of interesting to like the core progression of like the political narrative of the galaxy. I think it's going to be a lot like Mandalorian because it's safe and it's not bothering anyone, and that's a shame. They should take more chances, and I have not pre-ordered any tickets for Rogue Squadron because I don't believe that film should have that name, because I firmly think that almost no one working on it has played Rogue Squadron.
That is a true statement. I don't even think Patty Jenkins knows what a video game is. Prove me wrong.
I'd like to add to my statement.
Go ahead, Joe.
I'm also going to say that I think that what you're going to see is you're going to see them start progressing at a really big clip with these Disney Plus shows, and then they're going to have major events that they're going to put as movies as a way to drum up the subscribership for the shows and
Interesting.
And to get movie box office. That's where I think they're playing.
That's a really interesting point. Go like the anime route type of thing, where when a story arc comes to an end, you get everybody to go to the box office. Yep. Exactly.
And I think that's what they're going to play out, especially once they started doing Star Wars Visions, which is an anime.
Sure.
Can we please? Okay, last week we talked about the idea that they're doing like a tie-in novelization. I did find that like for pre-order on Target.com, and I couldn't stop laughing. Rob, what's your idea of doing a novelization of an anime? What's your opinion on that?
These days, I don't think a novelization is a profitable or good idea at all.
Wait. How do subtitles work for an anime in book form? Like, how does that work?
That's a great question.
John Justice. Someone get John Justice. He can answer this question. How do subtitles work for an anime adaptation to book? I must understand.
From right to
left. Oh boy, that's delightful.
I think that is officially the dumbest thing I've ever said.
I love it. I
think my final question, which is very quick because I don't have everybody's opinions, totally back to the video. Just positive, negative, or neutral. What do you think of the host of Midnight Edge's voice? I am highly negative. I really dislike the way he sounds. I want to know what everybody else thinks.
I'm so glad you asked. I've been wanting to say this, but I couldn't find a place to say it. I think Midnight's Edge sounds like he was pre-recorded completely separately from the guy he's talking to. Like the way his whole cadence and everything sounds like he's literally not engaging in a human conversation with the other person in the video.
I would say that, and I think it's voice modulated. It sounds so bad that there's something going on there in the sound processing.
That's because
ask him if he wanted to play a game.
Yeah, well, it's because his opinions are so edgy, pun heavily intended, that his identity, he's just not safe if he reveals his true identity.
Much like
Okay.
any of us on this podcast.
Okay, as somebody who likes like Andre's voice on Midnight's Edge, okay, your opinions aren't exclusive. I can still remember back in like my Rebel Scum forum era days from like 5+ years ago, where I would post their videos and people would just like comment like and just curse at me for like, this guy's voice sucks, and I'd be like, I kind of like his voice. So your opinions aren't exclusive, but I disagree with them.
I have an opinion on his voice. I mean, I truly believe the man has a voice for print media. And by that, I don't mean reading books on like Audible or something. Use code ZengThis at checkout. But I mean a voice for like to be read in a room by itself, off on its own.
All right.
Is he like Stephen Hawking?
Huh?
Is he like Stephen Hawking, this guy?
No. I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, people would tell people, you know, oh, you have a face for radio. This guy has a voice for newspaper.
That's not nice, you guys. Like, I want on record. I do not condone any of this.
It's not his fault. He sounds like a speak and spell.
I do not.
Or possibly is a sentient speak and spell. Prove us wrong.
I do not condone any
Where's
of this.
Russ?
I find it.
Russ.
You know what?
I do not condone any of this.
I'm going to find a speak and spell and I'm going to freaking pants it.
Russ would not
Change his
participate in
battery
this
to speak
character
spell.
assassination. All right.
Oh my god! All right, is there anything else about Star Wars nonsense, Chris? Do you like how much has your hatred of the Bad Batch gone up or down, or is it about the same as usual?
The last 2 episodes did not offend me as much as some prior.
All right,
Yay.
we'll take that as a win momentarily.
Should I be watching this for relevance to a discussion we're doing? Because hold on, wait. I looked this up. I have 8 minutes left of episode 4.
I think you're going to be good with 2 minutes left on episode 4.
Like, I mean, there was an action scene going on. There was a lot of intense stuff, and I just turned it off because I was like, I got other stuff to do. I don't know what it was.
I think it's one of those shows where you're going to be good if you just watch the last episode.
Neat.
Yeah,
I have been watching the things where it's like, oh, we're going to show you all the Easter eggs. So I feel I'm watching the show through that.
I think you're watching the best parts then. You are a winner. You get your t-shirt in the mail.
Sweet.
Singer has so many t-shirts right now. All right. Anything else from you, Rob, Chris, Joe?
No. That was my final question about that dude's voice.
I am complete.
We'll make note of that, Chris. Anything else, Joe?
I am fine.
You are fine. All right. So concludes this episode of Knights of Vader, a Star Wars podcast. Check out the Facebook group. Type of Knights of Vader into Facebook, and you will find us there waiting for you. Look for us on Instagram, thanks to Chris, at KOV Podcast, which I hope Chris will clearly like post some pictures of like the UCS gunship and some Clone Wars figures just for giggles. Thank you to everybody who's emailed us at kovpodcast@gmail.com because I've seen some new emails in there. I promise I will, if I don't respond to you, I will address you on the next episode. If you like what you hear, please rate, review, subscribe to us on iTunes or whatever podcasting platform you're currently listening to us on. Thank you to An Inspiriority Complex for providing our theme song.
You're welcome.
Check out the show notes to hear more from them. All right, if you're interested in some more Rob and Zach shenanigans, come to the Cinemoddities podcast where you can hear Rob and I talk about.
Is this getting a quick turnaround? Is this coming out this week?
It should come out tomorrow morning.
Oh, then we are doing good old 2001 Tim Burton's The Planet of the Apes. What a low point for Cinemoddities that is.
And Chris, what was your opinion on that film from last week?
Are we talking about Jurassic or are we talking about Planet of the Apes?
Both.
I say
Both.
I say a solid thumbs up on both.
Wow.
Yes. Simos smiles upon me.
Oh my God. The fact that you know off the top of your head is very disconcerting to me. I find that very unnerving and maybe the most troubling thing you've ever said to me, Chris. All right. When you're not listening to us on the Knights of Vader podcast, where do people find you, Rob?
Oh, just like Zach said, over at Cinemoddities, definitely go check it out. It's good fun. We have a huge backlog of episodes, and even if you don't like dinosaurs or monkeys, there's other fun things in there for you. And of course, like Zach already mentioned, head on over to Spotify or Bandcamp or anywhere where music is released for some An Insperiority Complex or my other band, which has some stuff out, The Immortal Lansbury's. Thanks for having me, Zach. This was a good, deep discussion. I'm glad that we got past the Lego talk at the start, where I could actually give an opinion. But thanks for having me, as always.
All right, Zenger, when you're not forcing Ellie to watch Avengers Endgame after 2+ years, what are you up to on ZengThis in the non-existent Zeng Wars subset podcast?
Let me see here. Trying to force Ellie to watch Far From Home. So, I mean, that's the point we're at with that. No, we will be. We covered our favorite games over the past 6 months, and probably next week's episode will be a discussion on Jurassic World.
Woo!
And there will be some familiar voices on there. May not be Ellie's. I'm calling that now. She's going to rage quit. So we'll see how that goes.
I look forward to it. All right.
I don't.
Chris Porteous, when you are not going to the first toy show open up in Canada post-pandemic, what are you up to?
You can find me at the Chris Porteous on Instagram. And if you're still listening to this and haven't followed the new Knights of Vader Instagram, I'm going to doubly remind you to go and do that, because it's fun when a Instagram for a podcast used to exist, but then stopped existing for some sort of reason and now exists again. So go follow it.
Fun fact, folks, the reason why it doesn't exist is emotional trauma. Anyway, though, I was not expecting a laugh from that, but anyway, Joe Yazzo, when you are not on this podcast, what are you doing?
Well, you could find my store on eBay at Mooey's Vault 12601. Sell some vintage wares and some collectibles. So if you're interested in that, Star Wars or comic book variety, you can see them there.
Yes, it's like the eBay version of what Chris was just at earlier this weekend.
Got some vintage Star Wars comics if anyone's looking for them. Marvel.
It's all Jackson Comics. That's all it is. He didn't want to tell you that on the recording, but it's just Jackson Comics. All righty, folks. Good night. Good night, but not goodbye. And as always, may the Force be with you. And just because Russ isn't here, remember Alderaan, down with the Death Star.
Empire.
1, 2.
Oh, is it the Empire?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which Death Star?
Yeah, which Death
The Lego one.
It's not to scale.